Chapter 101. Emotienga stood in the main hall, carefully sizing up this palace-like immortal's cave. Spirit jades were the stairs, strange stones were the pillars, dragons and phoenixes were carved, and immortal aura lingered around it. He was secretly amazed. Compared to this immortal's cave, the Hall of Hu clan, the #1 clan in Tiandao sect, was nothing more than a rich man in the secular world. But what surprised her the most wasn't this palace, but the person sitting, or rather lying on the dragon couch. It was a middle-aged man who looked a bit younger than martial uncle Xianin. He had black hair, a short beard, gentle eyes, and a yellow crown and brocade robe, giving off an oppressive air of nobility. His face was about 50 to 60% similar to Qin Shi's, but his lazy and indulgent aura was completely different. At this moment he was leaning on the dragon couch, surrounded by 2 foundation-building maids. One was holding tea while the other was massaging his shoulders. They were quiet and extremely gentle. Emotienga was puzzled. Why doesn't this Grandmaster Jinghe look like a nascent soul cultivator? Besides, Xianqing School is a Dao school. How could he have the tranquility and self-discipline of a Dao cultivator? Halfway through her thoughts, Emotienga suddenly felt a gaze sweeping over her from the dragon couch. She hastily lowered her head, and obediently brushed off her clothes before kneeling down. Disciple Emotienga greets Grandmaster. Qin Jinghe didn't answer. He took the tea from the maid's hands and waved them away. Emotienga could feel him sizing her up unhurriedly, so she took a deep breath. She was somewhat worried that this Grandmaster wouldn't be satisfied with her failure in building her foundation this time. If Grandmaster Jinghe no longer recognized her as his registered disciple, her position would definitely be awkward. Her heart was in a mess. After a long time she heard Grandmaster Jinghe say faintly, "How do you feel about failing to build your foundation?" Emotienga paused. Although she just thought of this question, she didn't expect Grandmaster Jinghe would ask so directly. How should she answer? She pondered for a moment, then answered, "Disciple doesn't have any feelings." Qin Jinghe was a bit surprised and couldn't help but frown. "If you don't have any feelings, doesn't that mean you don't have any plans?" He frowned and released the power of a nascent soul cultivator. Even if it was unintentional, how could a small aura refining disciple resist it? Emotienga tried her best to stabilize her mind and said, "Disciple didn't make any mistakes in my foundation building process. I only lack talent. Disciple can't control talent, so I have no feelings and can only persevere." After she finished speaking, she felt her body lighten. Qin Jinghe pondered the matter for a moment, feeling rather amused. This little girl was really a bit interesting. She was just a little aura refining cultivator, yet she was able to remain so calm and collected. Furthermore, she was even able to calmly answer under his spiritual aura pressure. It seemed her willpower was also very firm, that Brat's judgment of people was quite accurate. If she wasn't burdened by her aptitude, this child would definitely have some accomplishments. Qin smiled and said, "Grandmaster, and Qi. Mo Qi and refining Qi and Mo Grandmaster and refining Qi." Qin Jinghe was still looking at her absent-mindedly, while Emotienga was obediently lowering her head. "Qin Yen Qin. And Mo. And Shi and Mo Mo. And Mo. While she was lost in thought, Qin Jinghe suddenly asked, "What medicinal pills did you take when you built your foundation?" His question was simple, but Emotienga was shocked. When she built her foundation, aside from the heart-calming pill this Grandmaster gave her, she also took constitution-enhancing pills and foundation-refining pills. This Grandmaster actually asked her this question, so he must have noticed something. Emotienga thought quickly and answered, "Grandmaster, disciple took foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills." Qin Jinghe, who was drinking tea, paused and looked at her. "Foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills?" "Yes," Emotienga answered calmly. In that split second just now, she decided to tell him everything. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, she couldn't hide anything. If she tried to hide this matter and angered this Grandmaster, he might just take her life. So it was better to be honest. At least she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple now. If she took the initiative to give him the recipe for constitution-enhancing pills, he would have no reason to be angry with her. "Constitution-enhancing pills?" Qin Jinghe repeated and asked, What are the effects of the foundation refining pills and constitution enhancing pills you mentioned? Where did you get them? Emotianga lowered her gaze and answered honestly, Disciple was in East Kunwa's Yumwu sect. There's a clan surnamed Jiang in Yumwu sect. This foundation refining pill is the ancestral medicinal pill of Jiang clan. It's said that it can increase one's chances of building one's foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill, Disciple happened to meet an aura refining cultivator who had this pill recipe. That cultivator had a dispute with two other cultivators. Coincidentally, both of them were injured, so Disciple obtained the pill recipe. This medicinal pill is used to enhance the effects of other medicinal pills, so Disciple took it together with the foundation-building pill, hoping it could increase the efficacy of the foundation-building pill. After patiently listening to her explanation, Qin Jinghe's eyes lit up. Yes, it was the constitution-enhancing pill. 200 years ago he also heard about the appearance of the constitution-enhancing pill recipe. However, at that time he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm and was unable to participate in the final fight. Later this pill recipe disappeared and never appeared again. This child was actually so lucky to obtain this pill recipe so easily. His gaze once again fell on Emotianga, seemingly pondering whether her words were true or false. Emotianga's expression was calm. What she said was the truth. Even if he used a technique to determine whether it was true or false, she wouldn't be afraid. Qin Jinghe finally withdrew his gaze and asked faintly, Where's the pill recipe in your hand? Emotianga promptly took out a jade slip and presented it to him. Grandmaster, this is the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill. Qin Jinghe simply raised his hand, causing the jade slip in her hand to fly towards him and fall into his hand. A moment later he revealed a happy expression. Constitution-enhancing pill. It's really the constitution-enhancing pill. The heavens are helping me. He stood up and paced back and forth before he turned to look at Emotianga. With a gentle tone he said, Emotianga, you contributed by presenting the constitution-enhancing pill. What reward do you want? Emotianga inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. She had gambled correctly. Although this grandmaster tyrannically took the pill recipe for himself, he also intended to give her some benefits. In that case, Emotianga raised her head. Her eyes revealed just the right amount of surprise, as if she didn't understand why this pill recipe was so important. However, she immediately said respectfully, Disciple obtained this pill recipe by accident. If Grandmaster needs it, Disciple will naturally offer it to you with both hands. Grandmaster is benevolent and wants to reward Disciple, so Disciple will be bold enough to ask. Disciple doesn't know whether Disciple can ask for foundation-building pills or not. Qin Jinghe was stunned for a moment before he burst into laughter. Good. You're still the most frank one. Her answer not only showed her respect but also impolitely asked for a reward, which was indeed to his liking. She obviously wanted something, so why did she put on an act? He muttered to himself for a moment, then said, You want foundation-building pills? That's fine. The school has a rule that those who make great contributions can be awarded foundation-building pills. This constitution-enhancing pill is a rare miraculous spiritual medicine, so I'll give you 3 foundation-building pills. Emotianga was overjoyed. Although she knew she would probably succeed, she didn't expect this grandmaster would be so generous as to directly give her 3 foundation-building pills. She immediately kowtowed to express her gratitude. Thank you, grandmaster. Qin Jinghe held the pill recipe. He was obviously distracted and didn't have the mood to deal with her. You can go now. Later, I'll order someone to deliver the reward to you. Yes, Disciple will take her leave. Wait. Emotianga stopped, trembling with fear. Grandmaster, do you have any other instructions? Qin Jinghe waved his hand. This is an important matter. Don't mention it to others. Yes. After leaving the cave, Emotianga touched her forehead and discovered it was covered in sweat. This Grandmaster Jinghe was rumored to be very easy to kill. If she hesitated and concealed it, she probably wouldn't have been able to leave this cave. However, he was also a very generous person. As long as she could win his favor, it would be very beneficial. Fortunately, she made the right bet. With 3 foundation-building pills, she, who had already tried to build her foundation once, would have a very high chance of building her foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill recipe, although she gave it to him, she already knew how to concoct it herself. It could be said that today not only did she not suffer any losses, but she also gained Grandmaster Jinghe's favor, which greatly benefited her. Once Imo Tiange left, Qin Jinghe, who was in the main hall, burst into laughter without any care for his image. He looked at the jade slip in his hand complacently. Constitution-enhancing pill. Constitution-enhancing pill. With this, reaching the late stage of the nascent soul realm won't be wishful thinking anymore. Every cultivator in the cultivation world knew the importance of medicinal pills to cultivators. No matter how bad a person's aptitude was, if they ate medicinal pills like food, their cultivation progress wouldn't be much worse than those who were extremely talented but didn't accept medicinal pills. Unfortunately, the cost of medicinal pills wasn't something everyone could afford. Aura refining cultivators had it easier since medicinal pills weren't too expensive. The most common aura nourishing pill used by aura refining cultivators only cost 2 spirit stones. Therefore, if aura refining cultivators could cultivate in peace and had a certain amount of financial resources, most of them could cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, if their cultivation level advanced by a large level, the cost of medicinal pills would increase by almost 100-fold. A basic medicinal pill used by foundation-building cultivators, soul-strengthening pills, cost 300 spirit stones. Therefore, most foundation-building cultivators were stuck in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. As for the core formation and nascent soul realms, it was even more awkward. Spiritual plants were hard to find and medicinal pills were hard to concoct. They often didn't have many medicinal pills to take in a year, so it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate only by absorbing spiritual aura. For aura refining cultivators, constitution-enhancing pills weren't very useful because they only took basic medicinal pills like aura-nourishing pills and aura-converging pills. If they took constitution-enhancing pills at the same time, they simply wouldn't be able to afford them. However, if they were given to core formation and nascent soul cultivators, they would be very useful. They could only take a few medicinal pills in a year, and the ingredients for constitution-enhancing pills weren't difficult for them. If every medicinal pill they took had a constitution-enhancing pill to increase its efficacy, the effects would be equivalent to having many more medicinal pills. The medicinal pills taken by nascent soul cultivators were all miraculous and spiritual pills. Qin Jinghe quickly calmed down and sent out a summoning talisman. A moment later, Qin Shi hurried over. As soon as he entered, he received the jade slip Qin Jinghe threw at him. For a moment, Qin Shi was puzzled. "Master, why did you call me here?" Qin Jinghe raised his chin and said proudly, "Take a look at this pill recipe." Puzzled, Qin Shi probed it with his divine sense. In the next second he was gobsmacked. Where did this come from?" Qin Jinghe finally burst into laughter. "It was given to me by my newly accepted registered disciple. What do you think? How could this be? How come I didn't know about this?" Qin Jinghe sat back on the dragon couch and said absent-mindedly, "Maybe she simply doesn't know how important this thing is. All right, quickly concoct this constitution-enhancing pill. After a while I'll enter closed-door meditation." Qin Shi thought about it but didn't say anything. He didn't believe that Imo Tiange didn't know the importance of constitution-enhancing pills. She probably knew how important they were, so she didn't say anything. "Master," Qin Shi thought for a moment then asked, "what benefits did you give her?" Qin Jinghe raised 3 fingers. 3 foundation-building pills. How about it? It's worth it, right? For other people, foundation-building pills were invaluable, but for nascent soul cultivators, they weren't worth anything at all. "I understand." Qin Shi put away the pill recipe and looked pensive. Chapter 102. Imo Tiange stared blankly at the 3 foundation-building pills rolling around on the tray. Soon after she presented the pill recipes, someone sent her a reward. It wasn't just the 3 foundation-building pills she promised, but there were also other treasures, medicinal pills and spirit stones. The next day, another disciple sent her some things, including a bottle of freshly concocted constitution-enhancing pills of much better quality than hers. This time it was an order from Martial Uncle Shoujing. In fact, these 2 rewards were more valuable than all of her belongings, so she didn't feel uncomfortable about the pill recipes being taken away. At least, the 2 people from Qin clan didn't take them by force and treated her really well. After thinking about it for a while, she packed up her things and walked towards Martial Uncle Xuanin's cave. She used her identity tablet to open the outermost formation. After being informed by a disciple guarding the door, Emotianga walked into the hall of Master Daoist Chuanin's cave. Wei Jiaxi was also there, but she was expressionless when she saw her. Emotianga didn't mind and saluted Martial Uncle Xianin. Disciple Emotianga greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Master Daoist Xianin said with a kind expression, "Stand up." "Thank you, Martial Uncle." Emotianga stood up and saluted Wei Jiaxi. "Senior Martial Sister Wei." Wei Jiaxi's expression was indifferent. She responded coldly, then turned around to avoid looking at Emotianga. Emotianga didn't get angry. She just stood there obediently with her hands clasped. Master Daoist Xianin looked at her and asked gently, "Tianga, did you come here for something?" "Yes," Emotianga said with her head lowered. 2 days ago, Disciple was bestowed foundation building pills by Patriarch Jinghe. So Disciple came to ask Martial Uncle whether Disciple can immediately enter closed-door meditation. This. Master Daoist Xianin pondered for a moment, then asked, "You've been in closed-door meditation for half a year. Do you feel tired?" Emotianga shook her head. "Disciple doesn't feel tired at all. I'm wholeheartedly thinking about building my foundation." Master Daoist Xianin said, "Normally, aura refining cultivators with unstable minds shouldn't enter closed-door meditation for more than half a year, let alone enter closed-door meditation continuously. However, your mind is firm, so there shouldn't be any problems. If you want to enter closed-door meditation right now, that's fine. But to build your foundation, you have to be calm and your spiritual aura is unobstructed." Emotianga said happily, "In that case, Disciple will continue her closed-door meditation tomorrow." With a smile on his face, Master Daoist Xianin nodded and said, "You already know the steps to building your foundation, so there's no need to report to me. You can decide on your own." "Yes, Disciple will take his leave." With his permission, Emotianga once again immersed herself in closed-door meditation, preparing to break through to the foundation-building realm. She still had one foundation-refining pill left from Jiang Qingxian. Last time she only managed to concoct 2 constitution-enhancing pills and used one. Fortunately, among the things Martial Uncle Shoujing sent her, there was a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills she had just concocted. Once everything was ready, Emotianga informed Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen, who could be considered her friends, that she was going to enter closed-door meditation again. Yi Jingwen rushed over before she entered closed-door meditation and warned her in detail. Luo Fengxue promised to take good care of her medicinal fields while she was in closed-door meditation. Once all the chores were taken care of, Emotianga once again closed the cave. Perhaps to other people, entering closed-door meditation to build her foundation only a few days after failing to build her foundation might be a bit too impatient, but Emotianga was very calm. In fact, during the last 3 months of her closed-door meditation, she already knew she failed to build her foundation. However, she still used the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill to cleanse the spiritual aura in her body, so she didn't feel impatient. With a calm mind, Emotianga closed her eyes and once again immersed herself in the world of cultivation. The peaks of Mount Taikong were full of spiritual aura. This place was right next to Master Daoist Chuanin's Immortal's Cave, so the spiritual aura here was even more overflowing. Emotianga slowly operated the spiritual aura in her body. Starting from her dantian, the spiritual aura flowed through her meridians and finally returned to her dantian. Next to her, the spiritual aura gathered bit by bit and rushed into her body, gradually submerging into her meridians. The Eam's spiritual aura inside her body circulated smoothly. Although she absorbed a lot of spiritual aura, it didn't increase in the slightest. The spiritual aura circulated through her body once before gradually dissipating. The peak stage of the aura refining realm meant that if she didn't build her foundation, her cultivation level wouldn't increase anymore. Nevertheless, she wasn't anxious at all. She just slowly controlled her spiritual aura, moving it in a big circle over and over again until her whole body became accustomed to this kind of repeated cycle. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she felt as if her whole body had become a universe. She began to swallow the auxiliary medicinal pills one by one and finally the first foundation-building pill. The spiritual aura inside her body once again skyrocketed, and her meridians cracked inch by inch. However, this time her expression didn't change in the slightest. She still steadily followed her original pace, controlling the world inside her body bit by bit, absolutely not changing because of external factors. That powerful force gradually dissolved into the Ein's spiritual aura and was even assimilated step by step. When this spiritual aura gradually weakened, she almost didn't think twice and once again swallowed a foundation-building pill and a constitution-enhancing pill at the same time. The two divine senses paying attention to her were both startled. They almost wanted to order her to stop immediately, but when they saw that she was still calmly operating her spiritual aura, they finally gave up. If the first foundation-building pill was like a gale blowing inside her body, then this time, it was like a monstrous wave surging to the sky. These waves came crashing down, hitting her meridians solidly, but she remained motionless. She did not block them but rather merged herself into them, drifting along with them. She waited until she gradually grasped the pulse within, then slowly seized control of her own body. After she took the third foundation-building pill and the constitution-enhancing pill, the gradually calming waves turned into overflowing seawater that washed away everything, drowned everything, and completely surrounded the Ein's spiritual aura as if it wanted to swallow it whole. However, she still calmly and persistently operated this weak spiritual aura, slowly driving it and slowly swallowing it. After an unknown amount of time, this spiritual aura was finally swallowed and turned into a huge river, gradually widening her meridians. In the end, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it rushed towards her dantian. At this moment, a strange scene appeared in Clear Spring Peak. Countless spiritual aura, as if it was being pulled, rushed towards a certain place. Countless Clear Spring Peak disciples came out of their immortals' caves and saw this spiritual aura turning from invisible to tangible until it converged at a certain place. Several clouds leisurely floated over and stopped above that immortals' cave. They intertwined with the spiritual aura, gradually interweaving to form a rainbow bridge. Core formation. Someone has formed her gold core. A disciple who had seen his sect's elders form their gold core shouted, attracting the attention of other disciples. Spiritual aura converged and auspicious clouds loomed. One after another, the core formation elders of Mount Taikong also came out of their immortals' caves to observe this scene. Clear Spring Peak was filled with people. Countless people rushed towards the immortals' cave located halfway up the mountain. At this time, a person appeared in midair. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the crowd below and shouted, "Disciples of Clear Spring Peak, return to your immortals' caves. No delays." His voice was clear and melodious as if it was right next to their ears. When the disciples saw the figure standing in midair, they saluted and obeyed his order. Nevertheless, they still started discussing in twos and threes. Junior Marshall Brother Shojing. Core formation cultivators from other peaks rushed over and asked, "What's going on? It seems like someone formed his gold core, but his momentum is somewhat lacking. Could it be that the disciples of your Clear Spring Peak are practicing some kind of secret technique?" Qin answered faintly, "Senior Marshall Brothers, you don't need to be surprised. A disciple of my Clear Spring Peak is just building his foundation." Building his foundation? These cultivators were even more surprised when they heard the answer. How can a foundation building trigger a celestial phenomenon and a spiritual aura vortex appear? I'm still paying attention to this matter. If there's any news, I'll tell you in detail. This isn't normal. Master Taoist Xianyin flew over and greeted the core formation cultivators surrounding Qin Shi. He then said with a heavy voice, "Senior Marshall Brothers and Junior Marshall Brothers, Junior Marshall Brother Shojing and I will pay close attention to this matter. You should go back first to avoid causing panic among the disciples." His words finally made the core formation cultivators stop asking questions. After a short discussion, they left on their own. Qin Shi and Master Taoist Xianyin landed in front of Mo Tianga's immortals' cave. Both of them had grave expressions on their faces. "Junior Marshall Brother Shojing, in your opinion, why is this happening?" Qin Shi was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "Several hundred years ago, a spiritual beast from the distant past era awakened in a 10,000-year-old glacier. At that time, auspicious clouds gathered in the sky and thunder rumbled like a celebration." Master Taoist Xianyin was startled. "You mean?" Qin Shi shook his head. "I'm not sure. However, a spiritual beast from the distant past era that looked ordinary was able to trigger such a celestial phenomenon. Presumably it's because of the difference in their realms." Master Taoist Xianyin pondered for a long time, but he still didn't understand. Even if that's the case, the cultivation technique she practices is from the present era. It has nothing to do with the distant past era. She didn't continue to talk about this matter. He only said, let's wait and see. When she comes out of her closed-door meditation we'll know what's going on. However, the amount of time they had to wait exceeded their expectations. Half a year had passed, but Emotienga still hadn't come out of her closed-door meditation. She was like a silkworm spinning a cocoon, sitting cross-legged in her immortal's cave without any awareness. The immortal's cave was filled with spiritual aura that had almost turned into liquid, while her surroundings were densely wrapped with En's spiritual aura. Layer by layer, the En's spiritual aura almost solidified and wrapped her tightly. A year had passed and Master Taoist Xianin was already somewhat impatient. Cultivators usually needed several months to half a year to build their foundation. When the celestial phenomenon erupted, Emotienga had already been in closed-door meditation for almost half a year. In total she had been in closed-door meditation for a whole year and a half. No one in Xianqing school had ever needed such a long time to build their foundation. A year and a half had passed. Even the head Grand Supreme Elder of the school had come to ask why this disciple had needed such a long time to build her foundation. 2 years had passed. She stood in front of the immortal's cave in silence. In the beginning they could still use their divine senses to investigate the situation inside the immortal's cave, but later, it seemed as if there was a dense layer of spiritual aura inside that even the divine senses of core formation cultivators like them couldn't penetrate. Now they simply didn't know what the situation inside was like. They could only vaguely feel that the person inside was still alive. During a foundation building process, bystanders absolutely couldn't disturb them. Otherwise, at best they would be seriously injured. At worst, their cultivation levels would regress. When he was free, he came here to stand for a while, but he didn't know when the door of the immortal's cave would open. He raised his head and looked at the clouds above. The spiritual aura above condensed into a rainbow bridge with spiritual birds flying in the air. It was as beautiful as a fairyland. All of a sudden the rainbow bridge moved. In an instant the clouds and fog dispersed, and the spiritual birds flew up, disappearing without a trace. It was as if the scene just now was an illusion. His brows twitched. He turned his head and stared at the stone door in front of him. The spiritual aura inside the immortal's cave was also rapidly dissipating. In less than a quarter of an hour, it had completely dispersed. Almost none of the disciples of Clear Spring Peak noticed that the scenery that had been there for more than a year had quietly disappeared. The stone door finally opened. A person slowly walked out with a smile on his face. Chapter 103. Clear Spring Peak disciple Emotienga, Lord Taoist Jinghe's registered disciple, advanced to the foundation building realm at the age of 23. After recording these words in the disciple register, the foundation building cultivator in charge of the school administration handed her a jade tablet and said with a smile, "Congratulations on advancing to the foundation building realm, junior martial sister Emo. This is your new tablet." Emotienga took it and said politely, "Thank you, senior martial brother." The foundation building cultivator explained in detail, "Since junior martial sister advanced to the foundation building realm, you can change the tools in your immortal's cave. However, your Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so your immortal's cave isn't managed by the steward's hall. Junior martial sister, please ask your master about this matter. As for the tools, you can get them together. Junior martial sister, take the tablet and go to the back hall to find Steward Lu." "Thank you." Emotienga went to the back hall, found a steward and took some clothes and tools before leaving the steward's hall. Holding the foundation building disciple's tablet, Emotienga looked up at the sky and felt like she was dreaming. Even with 3 foundation building pills, she wasn't sure she could build her foundation. She just tried her best with faith and fortunately she succeeded. With her spiritual aura circulating, her body seemed weightless and she flew steadily in the air. Aura refining disciples could only use light body techniques and some spirit tools that could increase their speed. They couldn't use flying magic tools or fly for long periods of time, so they were only a bit stronger than mortals. Foundation building cultivators, on the other hand, had enough spiritual aura to operate flying magic tools and fly in the air. No wonder people said foundation building was the real threshold of cultivation. Because riding a sword and flying thousands of miles in a flash was the real means of immortals. A cool breeze blew in her face and the mountains and rivers were all in her sight. She stood in the air and thought if second uncle knew he'd be very happy, right? She finally built her foundation and crossed the threshold of cultivation. In the future she would walk step by step until she reached the core formation realm, the nascent soul realm, and even ascended. Although she didn't know which step she could reach, she would persist until the last moment. With a faint smile she slowly flew back to her cave. As soon as she came out of her closed-door meditation in her cave, she saw Qin Shi. When she found out she actually spent more than 2 years in closed-door meditation, and when she learned she actually triggered a celestial phenomenon similar to core formation, she was even more shocked. She really didn't think her foundation building could be compared to core formation. Aside from the longer time it took, there was no other difference in the process. After she built her foundation building, the spiritual aura inside her body also didn't have any abnormalities, so how could it have triggered celestial phenomena? It should be noted that only those who advanced to the core formation stage or above could trigger celestial phenomena. Those who advanced to the foundation building stage could, at most, cause some fluctuations of spiritual energy. Qin Shi just told her not to think too much about it. Martial Uncle Xianin happened to be in closed-door meditation these past few days, so she had to deal with some chores first and wait for Martial Uncle Xianin to finish his closed-door meditation before going to see him. Mo Tiange changed her identity tablet, took a new set of sect clothes and some foundation-building rewards. She also thanked Yi Jingguan and Luo Fengxue for taking care of her for the past 2 years before returning to her cave. In any case, it was a fact that she had reached the foundation-building stage. She should properly think about some matters in the future. The first problem was the cultivation method. She originally practiced the art of Sunu and Greenwood art. Although Greenwood art could be practiced until the core formation realm, it was very difficult for it to display its full power against foundation-building cultivators. Her purpose in practicing Greenwood art was to make up for the art of Sunu's lack of power in fights of magical powers, so she might as well give up on it. However, if she gave up on the Greenwood spell, she would have to learn a new divine power to use in fights of magical powers. The second problem was magic tools. Aura refining cultivators used spirit tools while foundation-building cultivators used magic tools. Compared to spirit tools, magic tools were usually 10 times more powerful. Now that she had built her foundation, she naturally had to change all her spirit tools into magic tools. In fact, she also had a lot of magic tools. Most of them were left behind by second uncle. Some of them were awarded to her by Grandmaster Jinghe and Martial Uncle Shoujing before she built her foundation. The other 2 magic tools were the Heaven and Earth Cloud Silk Armor and the Land Fleeing Ruler. When she left Mount Yunwu, Qin Shi stole them in passing and gave them to her. However, although she had a lot of magic tools, most of them were auxiliary and defensive types. Second uncle's magic tools weren't suitable for her, so she could only look for other magic tools. In addition, her Qinkuan bag still contained the carcass of the second-rank iron-teethed crocodile she killed in Yunwu. In the future she could take it and ask someone to make it into a magic tool. The last problem was medicinal pills. Foundation-building medicinal pills weren't as easy to obtain as aura-refining medicinal pills. Even though she was now an elite disciple, it was still impossible for her to eat them like before. Before she could figure out how to solve this problem, Luo Fengxue told her that Martial Uncle Xianin already came out of his closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange temporarily put these matters aside and went to see him first. Upon entering Martial Uncle Xuanin's Immortal's Cave, Mo Tiange discovered that this time, everyone was present. Not only were the 2 senior martial sisters present, but several senior martial brothers were also present. These senior martial brothers were very diligent in their cultivation. Mo Tiange had been at Xianqing school for a long time, but she still hadn't met some of them. Disciple Mo Tiange greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Master Taoist Xianin was still smiling. He raised his hand and said, "Stand up." Mo Tiange stood up and said respectfully, "Disciple finished building her foundation and came to report to Martial Uncle." Master Taoist Xianin nodded with a smile. "I already know. You're very good. Come forward and let me take a look." Yes. Mo Tiange walked forward. Master Taoist Xianin reached out and held her pulse. A wisp of spiritual aura instantly entered her body and examined her meridians one by one. After a long time, Master Taoist Xianin released her hand with a slight frown on his face. Mo Tiange, who was a bit worried, asked cautiously, "Martial Uncle, is there a problem?" Master Taoist Xianin shook his head and said, "There's no problem. there's no problem at all. You already know about the phenomenon that occurred when you built your foundation, right? Yes. Then did you feel it yourself? Emotianga shook her head. Disciple lost consciousness after that. I basically didn't know it took me 2 years. So that's what happened. Master Taoist Xianyin pondered for a moment but didn't say anything. He said to her, let's talk about this later. Yes. Seeing that martial uncle Xianyin had something to deal with, Mo Tiange obediently stood to the side without saying anything else. Qingyu. Upon hearing her name being called, Han Qingyu stood up and said, Master. This is an important matter. Take several junior martial brothers and sisters with you. If there's nothing, that's fine. If there's something, quickly come back and report to me. I understand, Master. Master Taoist Xianyin then turned towards the other disciples. He stroked his beard and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, Shernan Qifengxia, the 3 of you follow eldest martial sister. Yes, Master. Alright, you can all go back. Can you stay? Yes, martial uncle. As she watched her fellow disciples leaving one by one, Mo Tiange muttered inwardly. Could it be that something big happened? Martial uncle Xianyin actually sent 4 disciples at once? She didn't have much time to think because Master Taoist Xianyin already said to her, Tiange, although you're not my disciple, you respect me as your master. Now that you've built your foundation, martial uncle will naturally give you some rewards. Mo Tiange said, Disciple was able to build my foundation thanks to martial uncle's guidance. I don't dare to ask for any rewards. Master Taoist Xianyin stroked his beard and said with a smile, You don't need to refuse. Every disciple who builds their foundation will get a reward, not just you. After pondering for a moment, he continued to say, Let me ask you, is the cultivation technique you practice inferior in fights of magical power after building your foundation? Mo Tiange was slightly shocked. As expected of a core formation cultivator. She hadn't even said anything but he already sensed it. She answered, Yes, martial uncle's eyes are like torches. I practice 2 cultivation techniques. One of them is beneficial for cultivation, but it doesn't have any great divine power. As for the other one, its power is greatly reduced after building my foundation. Master Taoist Xianyin nodded slightly and stood up. That being the case, I'll pick a cultivation technique for you. Come with me. Yes, martial uncle. Mo Tiange followed Master Taoist Xianyin out of the hall. After making many turns and passing through some restrictions, they finally entered a small collection room. As soon as they entered the collection room, Mo Tiange saw several wooden shelves with many books, jade slips and the like on them. Master Taoist Xianyin said, Martial uncle has never seen a female cultivator with a pure Yin constitution, so I don't know the characteristics of the cultivation technique you practice. I can't pick the most suitable cultivation technique for you, so I can only pick a few roughly. Mo Tiange lowered her head and said, Martial uncle is so attentive. Disciple is overwhelmed by the favor. Master Taoist Xianyin had a very good impression of this junior's politeness, so he didn't say anything more. After pondering for a while, he picked several books and jade slips and handed them to her. Take a look. What do you think of these? Mo Tiange took them and carefully looked at them. These were all cultivation techniques for fights of magical power. They didn't require special cultivation and didn't have high requirements for spiritual roots. However, the shortcoming was that they weren't very powerful and would be useless once one reached the core formation realm. Nevertheless, since this martial uncle put them in the collection room, they certainly weren't ordinary cultivation techniques. The most important thing was that they were suitable for her. Mo Tiange hesitated for a while before she raised her head and asked, Martial uncle Xianyin, do you have any cultivation techniques that can be used with magic tools? Disciple feels that if we only talk about power, perhaps that one would be a bit stronger. Master Taoist Xianyin nodded. What you said is very reasonable. Regarding magic tools, junior martial brother Shoujing asked me to give them to you. Since you asked, I'll give them to you first. As he spoke, Master Taoist Xianyin took out an object from his Qingkuan bag and held it in his hand. This object is called the Shuttle of Flying Apsara. It's a shape-shifting object and contains an illusory formation. However, using this object isn't a cultivation technique but a formation. Since you're good at formations, I presume it's suitable for you. Mo Tiange took a closer look at the Shuttle of Flying Apsara. The Shuttle of Flying Apsara had 2 pointed ends and was made of an unknown material. Although it was only the size of a palm, it was brimming with spiritual aura, so it was certainly not an ordinary object. Master Taoist Xianyin gave the shuttle of flying Apsara and a jade slip to her. Although you have this object, you still have to choose a cultivation technique for fights of magical powers. Otherwise, if you rely too much on magic tools, you'll be at the mercy of others. How about this? Martial Uncle will make the decision on your behalf. This soul-refining art cultivates the primordial spirit, so it's extremely powerful. I originally thought this technique was difficult to practice and wasn't suitable for you, but since you're determined to cultivate magic tools first, I'll give it to you to practice slowly. This cultivation technique isn't easy to practice and can easily lead to cultivation deviation, so I don't dare to give it to other disciples. However, since you have a pure constitution, the chances of you suffering from cultivation deviation are lower than others, so presumably, it won't be too big of a problem. Yes, Martial Uncle. Mo Tiange accepted the other cultivation technique Master Taoist Xianyin gave her. After skimming through it, she was immediately overjoyed. This cultivation technique clearly stated that one could only practice it after they built their foundation. Moreover, it could be practiced until the nascent soul realm. It was a high-level cultivation technique. If she practiced it diligently, it would definitely become her trump card. After leading Mo Tiange out of the collection room, Master Taoist Xianyin gave her a flying sword and a bottle of medicinal pills. He said, "Since your martial uncle Shoujing already gave you magic tools, I'll give you a flying sword. As for this medicinal pill, it's a soul-strengthening pill for foundation-building cultivators. It's your disciple's portion, 1 bottle every year. Foundation-building medicinal pills are much rarer than aura-refining medicinal pills, so I hope you treasure them well." Chapter 104. Mo Tiange stared at the shuttle of flying Apsara in her hand. It was similar to the shuttles used to weave cloth in the secular world, but it was a bit bigger. It was thick and round in the middle and pointed at both ends. She didn't know where it was made from, but it shone with a golden light and was impervious to heat and cold. A rustling sound came from the forest, and a first-rank spiritual beast appeared in front of her in a daze. Mo Tiange smiled. This little thing really came at the right time. She raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden light that soared into the sky. The small spirit beast that resembled a squirrel raised its head and stared at the flashing golden light with its beady black eyes. To its surprise, it discovered that the streak of golden light had transformed into hundreds of tiny golden streaks that were arranged in a circular formation around it. The little spiritual beast seemed to have just realized the danger. It shrank its head, swung its tail, and turned around, wanting to jump away. However, the countless golden rays had already sealed off all of its escape routes. No matter how it tried to jump, it couldn't escape. The little guy was anxious. It bared its teeth and clapped its hands. A scorching hot spiritual energy rushed out and actually caused the golden rays to tremble. Mo Tiange was stunned. She pressed her hand down and the golden lights scattered and gathered again, pressing down on the little fellow. No matter how the little fellow struggled, it couldn't jump out. When it finally felt a bit tired, Mo Tiange shook her hand and tied it up with a rope. She withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara, walked forward and picked up the little spiritual beast. The little spiritual beast bared its teeth at her and struggled angrily. Mo Tiange didn't care at all. She rummaged through her Qianquan bag, took out a spiritual beast bag and put it inside. Once she was done, she released her flying sword and flew back to her cave on Clear Spring Peak. Originally, she just wanted to test the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara, but she unexpectedly caught an interesting little thing. This little thing obviously knew a very advanced fire element spell. Although its power wasn't great, it wasn't ordinary fire. Mo Tiange landed outside her cave and happened to see Luo Fengxue coming back. She called out, "Senior Martial Sister Luo." Luo Fengxue wiped her face and came over. "Tiange, did you go out?" Mo Tiange nodded, opened her cave and let Luo Fengxue in. Luo Fengxue, who looked exhausted, walked into her cave and sat motionlessly on a stone chair. Mo Tiange carefully looked at her expression and asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, what's wrong?" With great difficulty, Luo Fengxue lifted her spirits and sighed. "I've been busy for more than 10 days. I haven't rested." Mo Tiange was surprised. Mo Tiange knew Luo Fengxue wasn't an ascetic cultivator. Instead, she was passionate about management. After she built her foundation, she was promoted to steward of the steward's hall. But she knew that deacons didn't have to be busy every single day, and all the minor matters were handled by deacons and disciples, and she only had to oversee the deacon's hall on normal days. So what could possibly make her so busy? Senior Marshal Sister Luo, did something big happen in the sect? Luo Fengxue rubbed her brows and said weakly, do you still remember when eldest Marshal Sister took several senior Marshal brothers and sisters out of the sect a month ago? Fengxue said. It was something that happened when she went to see Marshal Uncle Xianin after she built her foundation. At that time, Marshal Uncle Xianin asked her eldest Marshal Sister, Han Qingyu, to take her 3 senior Marshal brothers and sisters with her. After her she said went and she and went. A few months ago there seemed to be some movement in the southern forest. Eldest senior sister and the others went to investigate, but after they left, there was no news of them. What? Mo Tiange was astonished. Luo Fengxue nodded. Eldest Marshal Sister and the others aren't the only ones who went missing. This time, other disciples sent by marshal uncles from other peaks also disappeared without a trace. Even though Mo Tiange wasn't involved in the matters of the school, she knew how important this matter was. The 17 foundation building cultivators were all elite disciples. If all of them died, it would be a big loss even for a large cultivation group like Shenqing School. Although there were more than 500 foundation establishment cultivators in the sect, they were the cream of the crop. They were the ones with the highest possibility of reaching core formation. Over the past dozen or so days, we've contacted the other sects, and we discovered that the other 6 great system-allocated sects are also in the same situation. Only then did everyone realize that this matter is not as simple as it seems. Luo Fengxue rubbed her reddened eyes then said to Mo Tiange, Tiange, you don't have to worry. This matter will be handled by the sect's elders so it won't affect us. Alright, I'll go take a rest first. That's all for now. Rest well, Senior Marshal Sister. Luo Fengxue waved her hand and returned to her immortal's cave while rubbing her eyes. Mo Tiange didn't think too much about it. Just like Luo Fengxue said, this kind of matter didn't need them foundation building disciples to worry about. The elders would handle it. She opened the spiritual beast bag and released the little spiritual beast. Once the little thing came out of the spiritual beast bag, it blinked its black eyes and stared at her as if it was begging. Mo Tiange then pulled the rope that was tied to its body away. Once the little thing regained its freedom, it immediately turned around and ran towards the entrance of the cave. Mo Tiange raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying Apsara was launched once again. A golden light enveloped it completely. Woo-woo. The little thing knew how powerful the shuttle of flying Apsara was, so it immediately turned around and begged for mercy. Mo Tiange retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara and said, if you don't run, I won't tie you up. The little thing seemed to understand her words. It sat with its hind legs together and put its 2 front legs together, making a begging gesture. Mo Tiange couldn't help but find it funny. She opened her hand and retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara. The little thing stared at the stone door reluctantly, but in the end it still slowly slipped back. Spiritual beasts were quite sensitive to dangerous things, and this little thing could naturally feel it. Mo Tiange's strength was far superior to it, so it couldn't run away and could only submit. Seeing that the little thing was obedient, Mo Tiange waved her hand. It had glossy brown fur, shiny black eyes, and a very large tail. It looked a bit like a squirrel, but Mo Tiange recognized it. It was a small spiritual beast called the Inferno Beast. This kind of spiritual beast generally couldn't cultivate to a very high level, but it was born with fire techniques. Its fire wasn't ordinary fire but ardent yang real fire. It was a kind of innate real fire that was even purer than the Dantian real fire foundation building cultivators. It was excellent for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools. Mo Tiange picked the little thing up, stroked its fur and said, be good and I'll help you cultivate. If I form my gold core one day I'll let you go. The little thing's eyes brightened as it stared at her. Looks like you agree. Mo Tiange smiled and put it on the ground. She took out a few aura-nourishing pills she no longer had any use for it and gave them to it. I'll give you a name. Since you're an inferno beast I'll call you Xiaohua. The little thing swallowed the aura-nourishing pills in one gulp, then raised its head and let out 2 woo sounds as if it was protesting her completely uncreative name. Mo Tiange smiled, completely unmoved. I didn't ask whether you agree or not. In any case, you'll be called Xiaohua. Come here, you live here from now on. You can play in the small valley behind, but you're not allowed to make trouble. If you're not obedient, I'll put you in the spiritual beast bag. The little thing let out 2 woo-woo sounds again. Emotienga patted it and gave it a few more aura-nourishing pills. She put it in the spiritual beast room and returned to the cultivation room to meditate. Only after entering the foundation building realm did she realize how useless her spiritual roots were. When she was in the aura refining realm, she ate medicinal pills in the spirit gathering formation, so her cultivation didn't grow any slower than elite disciples. But now that she was in the foundation building realm, even if she took medicinal pills, her progress wouldn't be as obvious as when she was in the aura refining realm. This month she couldn't cultivate properly, so the growth of her spiritual aura was minimal, so she had to stop. If she continued to cultivate at this speed, even if she used up the remaining 300 years of her lifespan, she still wouldn't be able to form her gold core. Therefore, when she saw this inferno beast, she was tempted. As it turned out, she concocted medicinal pills only for the sake of constitution-enhancing pills. Now that the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills had been given to Grandmaster Jinghe and Martial Uncle Shoujing sent her a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills every once in a while, she originally planned to give up on concocting medicinal pills. But now that she realized her aptitude was so useless, she had no choice but to pick up her pill-concocting skills. Emotienga sighed, then closed her eyes and began to cultivate. She already tested the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara. Martial Uncle Shenin said this thing could transform and contain an illusory formation. Indeed, this thing could attack and defend. It was indeed a first-class magic tool. In addition, Martial Uncle Shenin repeatedly warned her about the soul-refining art, telling her to cultivate it slowly and not to rush it. Although cultivating the soul-refining art was very risky, it was indeed very powerful. The soul-refining art was a cultivation technique that specialized in cultivating primordial spirits. It could directly launch attacks against primordial spirits, which had always been the weakest part of cultivators. If she succeeded in cultivating it, the power of this cultivation technique would be extraordinary. Primordial spirits were, in fact, what mortals referred to as souls. Humans were born with souls, but cultivators cultivated their bodies and souls, eventually forming their primordial spirits. Divine sense was derived from primordial spirits. Under normal circumstances, primordial spirits were hidden deep in the sea of knowledge in the Dantian, so divine sense couldn't attack them. On the contrary, it was easy to be injured. Ordinary cultivation techniques also strengthened divine sense, but they only made divine sense more sensitive and covered a wider area. This soul-refining art, on the other hand, cultivated primordial spirits so that divine sense would have the power to attack. Emotienga didn't dare to say there weren't other cultivation techniques that cultivated primordial spirits, but she was certain that very few people cultivated them. The reason was very simple. It was precisely because of the risk of suffering from chi deviation, as Martial Uncle Shenin said. Every cultivator knew how fragile primordial spirits were. When cultivating primordial spirits, if one didn't grasp the right amount, it was very likely that one's primordial spirit would be damaged, resulting in serious injuries. If it was a nascent soul cultivator, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, nascent soul cultivators had fused their primordial spirit and gold core into one, forming their nascent soul, so their primordial spirits wouldn't be that fragile. However, for cultivators below the core formation realm, if their primordial spirits were damaged, their cultivation levels would greatly regress. Because of this, Martial Uncle Shenin didn't give her this cultivation technique from the very beginning. Later on, he even repeatedly warned her not to be greedy. However, other people were other people. Emotienga, who cultivated this soul-refining art, had a few advantages compared to others. Her pure Yin constitution and originally extremely poor aptitude. Pure Yin constitution meant that Yin and Yang wouldn't clash, and spiritual roots of the origin could balance each other out. The so-called chi deviation occurred when one cultivated a cultivation technique that destroyed the balance inside their body. Emotienga had a pure Yin constitution, so she wouldn't have any Yin and Yang imbalance. Furthermore, she also had spiritual roots of the origin, so there was a small circulation inside her body. Because of that, she could be said to be blessed by nature when she practiced this technique. As long as she wasn't greedy and was cautious, the possibility of her chi deviation was very small. However, cultivating this technique was really not easy. Cultivating primordial spirits naturally had to start with the primordial spirit. But primordial spirits were extremely fragile, so they could only be strengthened slowly. Emotienga had been cultivating for about a month, but she still hadn't made any progress. Her cultivation level hadn't advanced, and she didn't have a clue about the cultivation technique either. Emotienga realized that after entering the foundation building realm, her future was very bleak. Chapter 105. The Inferno Beast was a kind of spiritual beast that was easy to raise. It didn't need special food or a good environment. It could be raised casually. This kind of small spiritual beast wasn't rare in Kunwu. Low-level cultivators liked to catch one or two to concoct medicinal pills or refine tools, so Emotienga wasn't worried about how to raise it. After catching the little Inferno Beast, Emotienga raised it in the spiritual beast room and in the small valley behind her cave. In any case, there weren't many things in her cave, and the medicinal fields in the valley were also covered with restrictions. At most, the little fellow could only gnaw on the turf and wouldn't cause much trouble. When it was hungry, she fed it with aura pills. When it was thirsty, there was a spring in the valley. Moreover, without any natural enemies, the little fellow grew round very quickly. After a month, she had some clues about the soul-refining art, and the Inferno Beast no longer had any resistance towards her. So Emotienga started to concoct medicinal pills. The basic medicinal pills for foundation-building cultivators were soul-strengthening pills. She had already concocted constitution-enhancing pills, so it wasn't difficult. However, the spiritual plants needed weren't as cheap as the medicinal pills for aura-refining cultivators. After spending several thousand spirit stones, she only bought 100 sets of raw materials. Fortunately, she now had the allowance of an elite disciple. In addition to her original several thousand spirit stones, she could afford it. After catching the Inferno Beast and bringing it to the concocting room, Emotienga closed her door and immersed herself in studying pill concocting. Several months passed in a hurry. One day she suddenly heard the ringing of a bell outside. Only then did she realize that a long time had passed. Emotienga stopped concocting and walked out of her cave. She happened to run into Wei Jiasi, who was walking out with a worried expression. Emotienga stepped forward to greet her. "Senior Martial Sister Wei, what happened?" Wei Jiasi shook her head and answered faintly, "I just heard the bell, so I naturally didn't know. This bell is used to summon disciples. Disciples from every peak have to go to the main peak when they hear it. You'll know when you get there." Wei Jiasi no longer looked at Emotienga and flew towards the main peak on her flying magic tool. Emotienga looked around. Han Qingyu hadn't returned since she disappeared, and Luo Fengshue's cave was also quiet. She was probably in the steward's hall. Emotienga didn't know anyone else, so she also flew towards the main peak on her flying sword. At this very moment, all the disciples on the mountain were busy, but they weren't in a mess. Disciples in the foundation building realm and above were riding their flying magic tools, while aura refining disciples were riding the 10,000 miles cloud shared by each peak, rushing towards the main peak. As Emotienga watched, she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This was the demeanor of a famous and big cultivation group. These disciples suddenly encountered a problem, but they didn't panic at all. Several thousand disciples acted in an orderly manner. Presumably, even if something happened, they wouldn't be the slightest bit flustered when dealing with it. Once she arrived at the main peak, she looked down and saw that the square was already full of people. Several dozen core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters were standing at the entrance of the main hall of the 3 pure ones with solemn expressions on their faces. Emotienga quickly found the place where the foundation building disciples were standing. She landed her flying sword and stood there solemnly. There were more than 10 core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters. She didn't believe that nothing serious had happened. Could it be related to Senior Sister Han's disappearance? Although Emotienga had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, she knew there was no news of Senior Sister Han after she disappeared. Several martial uncles left the mountain to look for her, but they didn't find any clues. She occasionally went to see Martial Uncle Shenin, but he always looked worried. The square was gradually filled with people. When all the disciples returned to their positions, an old nascent soul Taoist who was leading the group glanced at them. A core formation cultivator stepped forward and shouted, "Disciples, be quiet." His voice wasn't very loud, but it could be heard clearly in every corner. The disciples who were originally whispering to each other immediately stopped talking. The core formation cultivator's expression was solemn. He said in a deep voice, "I summoned all the disciples here because I have something to tell you. Several months ago there were abnormal movements of demonic beasts in the southern forest. We sent elite disciples to investigate, but unexpectedly, all of them went missing. To avoid chaos, this matter has never been announced. In the past few months, we've received news that a lot of disciples outside have gone missing, so we summoned everyone to seal the mountain." Once he said this, the square went into an uproar. Although many disciples hadn't experienced the mountain sealing order, they had heard of it. The so-called mountain sealing order was to activate the Great Mountain Protecting Formation, close the mountain gate and no longer receive visitors. Disciples were also only allowed to enter but not leave. Apart from those who received the order, they were cut off from the outside world. Mo Tiange had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, so Luo Fengxue rarely saw her. She actually didn't know the impact of her disappearance was so widespread. Since it could make one of the top cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole close their doors, it was clear how serious this matter was. At that moment, the old nascent soul Taoist standing in the middle raised his hand, and the core formation cultivator from before stepped back. Mo Tiange once heard from Luo Fengxue that this nascent soul grandmaster was the head grand supreme elder of Xianqing school, which meant he was the #1 figure in Xianqing school. Reportedly, his cultivation level was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, and his strength was also one of the best in the Celestial Pole. The head grand supreme elder, whose eyes had been half closed, suddenly opened them. His sharp gaze swept over the disciples in the square. After a while, he raised his voice and said, "Disciples, do you think Xianqing school is about to encounter a formidable enemy because of the mountain sealing order?" The square was silent, but judging from everyone's expressions, this nascent soul grandmaster was obviously right. Since the school was founded, the mountain sealing order only happened once every several hundred years, and every time it happened it was a great disaster. The old Taoist once again closed his eyes and said in a leisurely tone, "Let me tell you, it's not only Xianqing school, but all of Kunwu is currently facing another demonic beast riot. Furthermore, according to the disciples' reports, this time's demonic beast riot is extraordinary. Xianqing school can be said to be strong now, but we must understand the principle that, the more prosperous it is, the easier it will fall. Being too strong will always attract disasters. For the sake of Xianqing school's disciples, the Grand Supreme Elder has decided to seal the mountain until the demonic beast riot is over. During this period, Xianqing school's disciples must obey orders and can't leave the mountain without permission." Once the head Grand Supreme Elder finished speaking, Mo Tiange glanced at the foundation building cultivators around her and found many of them were frowning. Some were worried, some were excited, and some were afraid. She had heard about the demonic beast riot in the past. Most of the cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole were built on Kunwu Mountain Range, and to the south of Kunwu Mountain Range was a boundless forest. This forest and Kunwu Mountain Range combined to form the largest spiritual land in the Celestial Pole. There were many cultivators living on the mountain, and there were many demonic spirits growing in the forest. If the cultivation level of demonic spirits was high, their intelligence would gradually be similar to that of humans. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while the big demonic beasts inside would order low-level demonic beasts to attack the mountains and obtain some medicinal pills, spirit tools, and the like from human cultivators to help them cultivate. Every time there was a conflict between humans and demonic beasts, it was both a calamity and an opportunity. Demonic beasts wanted to snatch medicinal pills, while humans also wanted to kill demonic beasts to obtain their beast cores or corpses. There was no justice or evil, they were just competing for what they wanted. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment and immediately understood what her fellow foundation building disciples were thinking. They were excited because this was a good opportunity. If they made a great contribution or obtained some fated chances in this matter, their cultivation levels would advance very quickly. What they were afraid of was that some people would definitely leave the mountain to carry out a mission. Foundation building disciples like them were the backbone of the mountain's strength. If there was an accident, they wouldn't even have their corpses left. Mo Tiange wasn't worried at all. In any case, she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so he definitely wouldn't send her to die for something too dangerous. Besides, she wasn't afraid. During the 7 years she wandered around with second uncle, she went everywhere and encountered danger countless times, so she didn't think there was anything to be afraid of. Alright, aura refining disciples, go back to your immortals' caves and cultivate with peace of mind. Foundation building disciples, stay. Upon hearing that, the aura refining disciples left one after another. They looked at the foundation building disciples with sympathetic and envious expressions. Once all the aura refining disciples had left, the core formation cultivator from before stepped forward. Martial nephews, many of you experienced the demonic beast riot 50 years ago, so I presume I don't need to explain it in detail. The demonic beast riot isn't something that can be resolved by sealing off the mountain. We still need to go and eliminate the enemies. Aura refining disciples haven't entered the school of immortality yet, so you foundation building disciples are the cornerstones of Xianqing school. You still need to work hard on this matter. We'll send 6 core formation cultivators and more than 100 foundation building disciples. You can go and prepare yourselves, then wait for further notice. Once he finished speaking, the core formation cultivator signaled everyone to leave. Emo Tiange was full of questions. While following the crowd back to Clear Spring Peak, she was also puzzled. Shouldn't they announce the list of disciples participating in the demon exterminating battle? Why did it end so easily? Tiange. Just as she landed on Clear Spring Peak, she heard a voice coming from behind her. She turned around and saw that it was Yi Jingwen. Big brother Yi. She looked at Yi Jingwen and saw that his expression was similar to Luo Fengshue's. He looked exhausted, as if he had been busy all this time. That's not right. Yi Jingwen is the same as me. He doesn't have a job, so how could he be this tired? Yi Jingwen waved his hand, rolled up his sleeves and walked towards the house. Let's talk inside. Emo Tiange promptly opened the door to her immortal's cave and invited him inside. Once they entered, Yi Jingwen said, Tiange, in a few days I'll be leaving the mountain to carry out a mission. Emo Tiange was shocked. Yi Jingwen was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age and was one of the best among the elite disciples. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be sent out before the situation was clear. Big brother Yi, why were you chosen? Yi Jingwen smiled bitterly and said, it can't be helped. My master was chosen, so I can only go with him. Could it be that the people who will go have already been decided? Yi Jingwen nodded. Before this matter was announced, the martial uncles already knew about it and already decided who would leave the mountain to exterminate the demons. Each of the 6 peaks will send a core formation senior, and our Clear Spring Peak will be sent by my master, Master Daoist Qingyun. Oh. In that case, with the master there shouldn't be any danger. As for the foundation building disciples, only a few of them are elite disciples and most of them are ordinary disciples. You don't have to worry, they probably won't choose you. However, this matter also depends on the situation of the battle. If the situation isn't good, everyone might have to go, but if it's too good, they might send disciples like you who have just built your foundation to gain experience. I'm just here to tell you, so you have to be prepared. I understand. Seeing that she agreed, Yi Jingwen stood up without even taking a sip of tea. Alright, I'll take my leave first. Big brother Yi, you have to be careful. Yi Jingwen looked back with a smile, then hurriedly left. Emo Tiange turned around and went back to her immortal's cave, her mind full of thoughts. She wasn't afraid of what Yi Jingwen said. When they left the mountain to exterminate demons, they would be led by core formation cultivators, so the danger wouldn't be too high. However, she had just advanced to the foundation building realm and couldn't use the soul refining art yet, so her methods were a bit lacking. If she really participated in the battle, she wasn't confident. Forget it, she'd better make some preparations. If it really was her turn, she wouldn't be flustered. She had to prepare some life-saving measures. Chapter 106. After feeding the little inferno beast an aura-nourishing pill, Emo Tiange looked up and saw several flight lights streaking across the sky. She pondered for a moment, then left the little inferno beast in the small valley and left the immortal's cave by herself. After the mountain was sealed, the entire Great Mountain Barrier formation of Mount Taikong was activated, leaving only 1 or 2 entrances. Those disciples who were ordered to exterminate the demons would enter and leave from those entrances. However, other than the 100 or so disciples who were ordered to leave the mountain at the beginning, there were very few people coming in and out. This light must be a message. She hadn't received any news for so many days, so when she thought of Yi Jingguan, she pondered for a while, then went to the steward's hall. Before she entered the steward's hall, the two aura refining disciples guarding the door greeted her. Martial Uncle Emo Tiange chuckled. Now that she was in the foundation building realm, she was also a martial uncle in other people's eyes. She glanced at the steward's hall and asked, "Is there any news about the demonic beast riot?" One of the aura refining disciples answered, "Martial uncle, are you here to inquire about the news?" Emo Tiange nodded. "Correct. I have an old friend among the disciples of Mount Li. May I know how he's doing now?" The two aura refining disciples glanced at each other. One of them said, "Martial uncle, we also don't know much. We only know that the situation isn't good." "Martial uncle, you mustn't tell anyone about this. Aura refining disciples still don't know about it." "Yes, I know. The situation is not good. Are there any casualties?" "It seems so. You don't have to worry, Martial uncle. You'll get the news from Martial Uncle Luo soon." Presumably, these two disciples didn't dare to reveal too much, so Emo Tiange no longer asked. "Alright, thank you." Not long after Emo Tiange returned from the steward's hall, Master Taoist Xianyin sent her a message telling all disciples to go to his immortal's cave. Emo Tiange hurried over and saw that almost all of Martial Uncle Xuanyin's disciples had arrived. Everyone was standing solemnly with anxious expressions on their faces. Emo Tiange quietly walked up to Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue shook her head at her and sighed softly. Emo Tiange's heart sank when she saw Emo Tiange's tired expression and worried gaze. Once all the disciples had arrived, Master Taoist Xianyin finally opened his eyes. With a solemn expression he said, "You probably know the situation with the demonic beast riot this time isn't good. I asked you to come here to tell you about this." "Snow." Luo Fengxue raised her head and stepped forward. "Yes, master." "You talked to them." Luo Fengxue responded. She then turned around with a solemn expression and said, "Senior martial brothers and sisters, today, the steward's hall received a message from a Mount Li disciple saying Martial Uncle Hanyu of Drifting Cloud Peak has fallen." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. They all knew what the death of a core formation cultivator meant. The battle this time would definitely be very intense. Next, they would definitely need to rescue him. Could it be that this time their master, Luo Fengxue continued on, the head elder has already decided to send another group of disciples as reinforcements. The number of disciples will be similar to last time. Each peak will send one core formation cultivator, several elite disciples, and about 10 ordinary disciples. Our Clear Spring Peak has already decided that Martial Uncle Shoujing will be going. Martial Uncle Shoujing doesn't have any disciples, so the elite disciples will be chosen from among us. Emo Tiange was stunned. In Xianqing School, the cultivators who went to battle last time weren't too outstanding, but their cultivation levels weren't weak either. Clearly the battle wasn't urgent. However, Martial Uncle Shoujing was Grandmaster Jinghe's favorite disciple. His cultivation level and divine abilities were among the best among Xianqing School's core formation cultivators. Now the battle had just started, but they already had to send him out. Apparently the situation was very bad. What she could think of, the other disciples naturally already thought of. Those who were familiar with each other were currently discussing in low voices. Some were anxious, some were worried. "Enough," Master Taoist Xianyin said, stopping the disciples from whispering to each other. "Who among you wants to go?" None of the dozen or so disciples present answered him. After a while, someone finally stepped forward and asked, "Master, isn't the current situation very critical?" Master Taoist Xianyin nodded slightly. "There's no need to hide this matter from you. We received news from the outside that the casualties of the first batch of disciples we sent have reached 30%. If you go now, it'll naturally be very dangerous." After he finished speaking, his gaze swept through the disciples and he said, "Among you, those in the early stage of the foundation building realm don't need to go." Emo Tiange quickly swept her gaze around and discovered that everyone was dumbfounded. Her master actually said that those in the early stage of the foundation building realm didn't need to go. Clearly it was extremely dangerous. Although elite disciples like them were superior to ordinary disciples in fights of magical powers, they also cherished their lives more than ordinary disciples. Asking them to volunteer was too difficult. After a long time no one stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianyin wrinkled his brows and said with displeasure, "Is there no one willing?" "Master," a crisp female voice rang out, "I'll go." Emo Tiange looked up and was stunned. It was actually her second martial sister, Wei Jiaxi. Frankly speaking, Emo Tiange didn't have a very good impression of this senior martial sister Wei. Probably because her aptitude was excellent, her behavior was arrogant, and she rarely looked people in the eye. Emo Tiange's keen senses told her that this senior martial sister Wei looked down on her. However, she really didn't expect that this senior martial sister Wei would be so unyielding. She was obviously willing to go to a very dangerous place. Master Daoist Xianyin finally smiled as he looked at Wei Jiaxi. "Jiaxi, you're very good. Who else wants to go?" Emo Tiange swept her gaze over the crowd. Wei Jiaxi's expression was still calm, but there seemed to be a hint of determination in her eyes. Could it be that she had a reason to go? Master, I'm also willing. Me too. After a while, 2 more disciples stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianyin showed a gratified smile and said, "Good, very good. I'm very happy that you're willing to fight for the school. Everyone else can leave, but the 3 of you stay." "Yes, Master." "Tiange, let's go." After saluting Master Daoist Xianyin, Luo Fengxue quietly grabbed Emo Tiange's hand and pulled her out of the cave. After leaving Master Daoist Xuanyin's cave, the 2 of them walked for a while before Emo Tiange asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, is the situation really that dangerous?" Luo Fengxue rubbed her red eyes and nodded. "If it wasn't dangerous, Grandmaster wouldn't have let Martial Uncle Shoujing go. I hope Martial Uncle Shoujing and Martial Uncle Qingyin can come back safely. What are you thinking about?" Emo Tiange thought for a while, then answered, "I'm thinking about Senior Martial Sister Wei." Luo Fengxue let out a ha and patted Emo Tiange's shoulder. "Do you think it's amazing that second martial sister is willing to take the risk?" "Not really. But it's indeed very rare. Most cultivators were selfish. Even if it was a famous cultivation group that cultivated one's mind, there weren't many people who were willing to go even though they knew it was dangerous." Luo Fengxue chuckled, patted Emo Tiange's shoulder and said earnestly, "Don't be too easily moved." Second martial sister took the initiative to go because, halfway through her sentence, Luo Fengxue stopped talking and looked around to make sure there was no one around before she continued in a low voice, "Because of Martial Uncle Shoujing." Emo Tiange was confused. Luo Fengxue couldn't help but pat Emo Tiange's head. "Stupid. Just you wait, there must be other female disciples in our Clear Spring Peak who are willing to go." "Huh." Emo Tiange thought for a while and seemed to understand a little. "You mean, humph?" Luo Fengxue rolled her eyes and muttered, "In my opinion, it's their brains that aren't clear. What kind of person is Martial Uncle Shoujing? If their cultivation levels can't catch up, what's the use of thinking about it? The lifespan of us cultivators is far longer than that of mortals. If we don't have the same lifespan, how many years can we stay together?" In the end, Luo Fengxue sighed. Who said the distance between cultivators and mortals was far? It was the same between cultivators. The lifespan of foundation building cultivators and core formation cultivators was at least 300 years apart. Even if they loved each other like honey, they still couldn't love each other to the end. Emo Tiange said strangely, "There are so many core formation cultivators, but why do they only like Martial Uncle Shoujing? We're not mortal women. Do you think they only look at appearances?" Luo Fengxue patted Emo Tiange's head again, but this time she was praising her. "That's right. That's why I said they're not clear. They're walking on the path of cultivation, but they're actually the same as mortal women. However, it's not strange for Martial Uncle Shoujing to be liked. His aptitude is good, his cultivation level is high, he's handsome, and he's very young. None of the foundation building senior martial brothers in our school can compare to him." "Really?" Emo Tiange was curious. "I haven't seen Martial Uncle Shoujing yet. What does he look like?" Luo Fengxue wanted to say something but didn't dare to. She said helplessly, "He looks quite similar to senior martial brother Qin." "Oh, think about it. This year Martial Uncle Shoujing, and he's only 140 years old. At this age he's already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If he's lucky, it's not impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm before he's 200 years old. Moreover, Martial Uncle Shoujing has a good temper. Although he doesn't like to talk and is a cultivation maniac, it's precisely because of this that he's likable. Sometimes women are the same as men. The colder and more arrogant a man is, the more they want to conquer him, isn't that right? Emotienga stared at the sky and thought for a moment before she shook her head. I don't think so. In other words, this martial uncle Shojing was quite similar to senior martial brother Qin. However, to be honest, if it wasn't because they'd been together for several months, which made her develop a sense of dependence, she wouldn't have thought senior martial brother Qin was very likable. Most cultivators weren't ugly, and there were also a lot of them who were handsome. Moreover, most of them were cultivation maniacs, so there didn't seem to be anything special about them. Luo Fengxue looked defeated by Emotienga. I admit defeat. I don't have that kind of tenacity. Forget it. Emotienga smiled then asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, are you saying Senior Martial Sister Wei likes Martial Uncle Shojing? Others don't know but I do. Luo Fengxue said quite disdainfully, Martial Uncle Shojing occasionally comes out to give sermons and second Martial Sister always goes. Moreover, you also know that Martial Uncle Shojing doesn't have any disciples, so inner disciples like us often get errands and go to Martial Uncle Shojing's Immortal's Cave to handle some chores. Senior Martial Sister Wei goes there every time. Luo Fengxue looked around but didn't see anyone, so she lowered her voice and continued to say, about this matter I have to tell you about someone first. We used to have a martial uncle Qingyuan, Grandmaster's second disciple, but he died in an accident. His descendant, one of our senior martial sisters, was taken to Clear Spring Peak by Grandmaster. This happened more than 100 years ago. At that time, martial uncle Shojing had just been taken to Mount Taikong by Grandmaster. The two of them were about the same age, so Grandmaster taught them together. As for this senior martial sister of ours, her aptitude is a bit lacking, but fortunately with Grandmaster personally teaching her, how bad could she be? Just like martial uncle Shojing, she also built her foundation at the age of 20. But this senior martial sister, probably because she grew up with martial uncle Shojing and because Grandmaster personally taught her, she became complacent and always regarded martial uncle Shojing as something. Luo Fengxue continued to say, later, when martial uncle Shojing's cultivation level surpassed this senior martial sister's, Grandmaster gave him his own Immortal's Cave. After that he rarely contacted this senior martial sister. You also know that martial uncle Shojing is a cultivation maniac. Aside from cultivating, he doesn't like anything else, so this senior martial sister's wish naturally fell through. However, she has a bad temper and always makes things difficult for the female disciples who work in martial uncle's Immortal's Cave. So senior martial sister Wei was put in a difficult position. Exactly. Luo Fengxue curled her lips. At that time, second martial sister was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm while this senior martial sister was in the middle stage. I don't know why she went crazy, but she actually beat second martial sister until she suffered internal injuries and vomited blood. Because of this, Grandmaster let that senior martial sister go outside. Right now we don't even know which courtyard she's in. Emotienga was rendered speechless by this show of jealousy and jealousy. Immortal clans, prestigious cultivation groups. Unexpectedly, they also had this kind of gossip. Don't tell others about this. I'll tell you the details when I have time. I'm exhausted, I'm going to rest first. Chapter 107. Before long, the second batch of demon-exterminating disciples set off. Senior martial sister Wei was among them. They set off quietly. When Emotienga found out, she only received a sound-transmitting talisman at the entrance of her cave. It was sent by Qin Shi, saying he was also on the list of the second batch of disciples, but time was tight so he couldn't say goodbye to her. Emotienga only stared blankly for a moment before continuing to cultivate and concoct medicinal pills as usual. She couldn't meddle in these things, but she had to be prepared in case she was sent out of the sect during the fierce battle. A large cultivation group like Xianqing School had about 500 foundation-building cultivators, but they sent out more than 200 in these two consecutive battles, which accounted for half of the total number of disciples. According to the news they received last time, the casualties of the first batch of disciples were about 30 to 40 people. For a medium-sized cultivation group, the loss of 30 to 40 foundation-building cultivators was an immeasurable loss. Even a large cultivation group like Xianqing School couldn't underestimate it. Moreover, the battle had just started and was fierce. After this demonic beast riot, Xianqing School would probably lose at least 100 foundation building cultivators, which was enough to wipe out a medium-sized cultivation group. In that case, only a few foundation building cultivators in the school would be able to escape this disaster. Therefore, she had to be prepared in case she was sent out to participate in the battle without any means to protect herself. Time passed day by day. A tense atmosphere gradually filled the entire Xianqing School. Mo Tiange learned from Luo Fengxue that the whole of Kunwu was involved in the demonic beast riot. If Xianqing School hadn't issued a mountain sealing order and activated the Great Mountain Protecting Formation at the beginning, all the aura refining disciples would have been killed. Although there were many casualties among the foundation building disciples, the aura refining disciples weren't affected. Therefore, even if Xianqing School suffered heavy losses, it could recover in 100 or 200 years, and the school's strength wouldn't decline. After learning about this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. The head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang, was able to predict the direction of the situation at the beginning and avoid losses. Otherwise, Xianqing School wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. Luo Fengxue wasn't busy these days. Reportedly, because this matter was of great importance, the core formation elders of the school head's generation had taken over all these matters. Right now, the foundation building deacons only needed to pay attention to it from time to time. When she was free, Luo Fengxue came to chat with her every day. Although Mo Tiange was anxious to cultivate the soul-refining art, she also knew this matter couldn't be rushed. Every day she just cultivated step by step and chatted with Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue was actually busy for nothing. Her aptitude was good, but she wasn't too keen on cultivating. Instead, she liked to deal with miscellaneous matters. There was almost nothing in the entire Clear Spring Peak that she didn't know. She even knew a lot of gossip about the other peaks. Mo Tiange had never come into contact with people like her. However, such a lively scene reminded her of Murong Yen. Mo Tiange wondered whether Murong Yen had built her foundation or not. Hey Tiange, why are you in a daze again? Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and shook her head. It's nothing. I was just thinking. Senior Martial Sister Luo, you've been really free lately. I kind of missed the times when you were busy. Artist Luo. She said out and said mo, she, mo, Luo and, she, he and. Luo Fengxue glared at her and said, if eldest Martial Sister wasn't here, I wouldn't bother you. Right now only the two of us live here. If I didn't talk to you, would I talk to the spiritual beast? Luo Fengxue glanced at her and remembered something. By the way, how old are you, Tiange? Mo Tiange thought about it and sighed. 24. In the blink of an eye, it's been almost 4 years since I came to Xianqing School. These past 4 years had been too smooth for her, so she felt time passed quickly. Oh, if I remember correctly, you're 1 year younger than me. Are you practicing a youthful cultivation technique? You look the same as when you first came. I think so. Luo Fengxue shouted, you really don't know how lucky you are. A youthful cultivation technique. We female cultivators mostly cultivate to stay young. With a suitable youthful cultivation technique, we can save a lot of look-preserving pills. Many people are envious of us, but you're actually saying I think so. Mo Tiange felt a bit guilty. She got her cultivation technique too easily, so she didn't cherish it. You. Luo Fengxue shook her head and sighed. You're smart, but you're slow. You're stupid, but you're very good at controlling your limits. I can't even tell what kind of person you are. Mo Tiange was very curious. Senior Martial Sister Luo, how many kinds of people do you classify? Luo Fengxue thought for a while, then said, it's actually quite simple. Look at the 2 senior martial sisters living here and me. We each have one kind of person. Eldest martial sister is the most likable kind. She's considerate like a woman and has the spirit of loyalty like a man. Second martial sister is the kind that's neither likable nor hateful. She's too lazy to pay attention to other people and doesn't look for trouble. As for me, I'm the kind that most people like but a few don't. You see, I'm very popular. Among the disciples of Clear Spring Peak, I dare say I know the most people. Luo Fengxue praised herself for a while, then said, there's also the kind that most people dislike. They're the kind that doesn't have a good character but isn't narrow-minded. The last kind is the kind that's completely hated by others. The representative is our senior martial sister who was sent out of Mount Taikong. She doesn't have any self-awareness and only has herself in her heart. She thinks everyone has to revolve around her. Almost everyone hates this kind of person. Upon hearing Luo Fengxue talking about this gossip, Mo Tiange asked, could it be that this senior martial sister has no likability at all? Now that you've asked, I really can't remember. It happened a long time ago. At that time I think I was only 11 or 12 years old. I remember it happened not long after Martial Uncle Shoujing returned from Demonic Mountain. At that time Martial Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level dropped greatly and he barely survived. Second martial sister accepted the task of taking care of Martial Uncle Shoujing's cave while he was in closed-door meditation. Who would have thought that that senior martial sister actually hated second martial sister for being able to take care of Martial Uncle Shoujing? She made a big fuss and even attacked second martial sister. Think about it. Martial Uncle Shoujing almost lost his life but she still cared about being jealous. Naturally, she greatly offended Martial Uncle and Grandmaster. It was because of her father that Grandmaster didn't punish her. He only told her to leave Xianqing School and go to the branch courtyard to reflect on her mistakes for several decades. Alas, in any case I've never heard of anyone liking her. Oh. This kind of person was indeed unlikable. She didn't even have a sense of propriety. Speaking of eldest martial sister, I wonder how she's doing. I'm not really worried about second martial sister. In any case, Martial Uncle Shoujing is with her. Luo Fengxue looked up at the sky and sighed. There's still no news from senior martial sister Han? There's a bit of news. Luo Fengxue thought for a moment then said, a few days ago, there was news that a secret mark left by senior martial sister was found, but they haven't found her yet. I think it's very likely that senior martial sister is still alive. That's good. No bad news is good news. Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment then clapped her hands and said, you're right. That's exactly what you said. The two of them chatted for a while when they suddenly received a summoning talisman at the same time. Oh. It's Master's. Mo Tiange nodded. Mine too. Seems to be the same thing. Sco. The two of them finished their chores and rushed to Master Daoist Xuanin's cave together. Master. Martial Uncle. This time, Master Daoist Xuanin wasn't meditating. Instead he was walking in circles in the hall with his hands behind his back. When he saw them coming in he stopped and said, good, you're all here. Come here. He turned around and sat down on the main seat. He looked at his disciples with a solemn expression and said in a heavy voice, I called you here because the battle is fierce. Maybe you'll be sent to join the battle in the next moment. Mo Tiange was shocked. She glanced at Luo Fengxue and both of them looked bewildered. Xianqing School had sent more than 12 core formation cultivators. Even if Martial Uncle Hanyu died, there were still 11 core formation cultivators left. Xianqing School only had a little more than 40 core formation cultivators in total. They'd already sent a quarter of them but they still couldn't hold on? Could it be that one of the martial uncles also died? Master, eldest martial sister, second martial sister, they... Master Daoist Xuanin shook his head. Qingyu has been found so he's fine. However, with the current situation, it's hard to say whether they can come back or not. I've decided to leave the mountain to provide reinforcements. Among you, those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above follow me into battle. All the disciples were startled but no one dared to object. Those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above all answered in a low voice, yes, Master. As for you two, Master Daoist Xuanin looked at Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue. You two in the early stage of the foundation building realm also mustn't relax. I reckon that before long, you'll also have to leave the mountain to participate in the demon exterminating battle. Therefore I'll give you some magic tools and talismans first. Take them with you. Yes, Master. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other then each took the magic tools and talismans from Master Daoist Xuanin. After listening to his admonishment for a while, they finally left Master Daoist Xuanin's cave. The two of them walked in silence for a while. Finally, Mo Tiange said hesitantly, Senior Martial Sister Luo, do you have any way to inquire about the specific situation? Luo Fengxue asked absent-mindedly, what kind of information do you want to inquire about? One of them is Big Brother Yi, whom you also know. The other one is Senior Martial Brother Qin. Last time, Senior Martial Brother Qin said he also wanted to go to battle, but I haven't heard any news from him. Luo Fengxue said, "Your senior martial brother Qin will definitely be fine, but it's hard to say for senior martial brother Yi. Rest assured, I'll go to the steward's hall and ask the other senior martial brothers and sisters." "How can you be so sure?" "Of course." Luo Fengxue's eyes shifted. "Senior martial brother Qin's identity is special. He definitely won't be allowed to participate in dangerous matters. Besides, there's also martial uncle Shoujing. And that's true." That being said, Mo Tiange still felt uneasy. In any case, Yi Jingguan advanced into the foundation building realm many years ago and was now in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Qin Shi, on the other hand, advanced only a few years ago. Most likely his realm hadn't even stabilized yet, let alone his divine abilities. Even if he had a lot of treasures on him without a cultivation level, it would all be in vain. However, she didn't have to worry for long because not long after martial uncle Xianyin left the mountain, she received a notice to leave the mountain with Luo Fengxue to provide support. Chapter 108. Mo Tiange frowned as she stared at the billowing smoke and dust below. She had never thought that there would be such a chaotic scene outside. The fleeing crowd was chased by low-level demonic beasts. Those who couldn't escape in time were caught up by the demonic beasts. They were either torn to a bloody pulp or swallowed whole. All of a sudden she clenched her fists and bit her lips. In the end, she still retained some of her rationality and looked at Master Taoist Suxin. Martial Uncle Suxin? Taoist Master Suxin was a woman with a cold expression. At this moment she raised her hand and shot a horsetail whisk at the demon beast below. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange and the others attacked one after another. Blood splattered everywhere and limbs flew everywhere. These were all low-level demonic beasts, and with a few dozen of them taking action, they were immediately cleaned up. Mo Tiange wiped the blood off her hand, then glanced at Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue's complexion was a bit pale. She whispered, "How could this be?" Mo Tiange saw that Luo Yunyang was trembling. She knew Luo Yunyang had been a disciple of a famous cultivation group since she was a child and had never experienced such a bloody scene. Mo Tiange held Luo Yunyang's hand and said, "Senior martial sister Luo, let's just kill the demonic beast." Luo Fengxue finally regained her composure after a long time. She shook her head and said, "Don't worry, I can adapt." He then smiled bitterly. "In fact, our Xianqing school has always been prepared for danger in times of peace. Most of our disciples have experienced fighting. It's just that I like doing chores, so I never thought there'd be a day when I'd need to fight by myself. Alas, I've indulged myself too much." Most of these people were mortals who lived in a certain city or a certain clan. Now that they were saved, they all knelt down and kowtowed. There were even some who begged bitterly to be brought to a safe place. Feeling a bit sad, Mo Tiange turned to look at Master Taoist Suxin. Master Taoist Suxin shook her head and said, "We have other important matters to attend to. We can't delay any longer." Mo Tiange knew what Master Taoist Suxin said wasn't false. Their group only had about 20 people in total. If they sent these mortals away and came back later, they wouldn't know how long they'd have to drag things out. The longer they arrived one day later, the more difficult the situation would be. Since it was beyond his power, there was no need to force it. However, someone shouted, "Uncle Master, if we don't do anything, these mortals will probably die." Master Taoist Master Suxin glanced at that person coldly. "Although our Tao school scrupulously abides by the rules, we still need to weigh the consequences. If these mortals leave Kunwu Mountain as soon as possible, they'll be able to keep their lives. Let's go." As he spoke, he controlled his flying magic treasure and instantly left this place. The immortal path was not heartless, but there was a limit to it. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly but didn't say anything. Several days later, they finally arrived at their destination. Mount Taikong had a great mountain protecting formation. The demonic beasts once suffered losses from this heaven and earth life-killing formation, so they didn't dare to attack directly. Instead, they kept harassing the small cultivation groups and clans attached to Xianqing School in the vicinity of Mount Taikong. It was precisely because of this that Xianqing School couldn't stay out of this matter. Many of the disciples and resources of big cultivation groups came from these cultivation clans and small cultivation groups. Without them, half of Xianqing School's foundation would be ruined. Before she left the mountain, Mo Tiange already knew that the war in West Kunwu was mainly happening at Luoyan Cliff. Most of those cultivation clans and small cultivation groups had also moved there. From afar, everyone could see that there was a large array set up on the cliff. Within the array there were tents all over the mountain. Master Taoist Sushin looked at this scene with a deep frown on her face. She led them to stop outside the array. A group of patrolling cultivators came over and respectfully saluted them. "May I ask Senior Enchanting School's Taoist name?" Master Taoist Sushin's disciple stepped forward and answered, "My master's Taoist name is Sushin. We came to help under the orders of the sect." "Oh, so it's Master Taoist Sushin. Sorry for not coming out to greet you. I'm Hong Yuan from the Shangqing sect, currently responsible for patrolling Luoyan Cliff. Please show me your sect identity tablet. Please forgive me if I offended you in any way." Hong Yuan was polite, but he didn't forget his duty. Although they were all wearing Shangqing School's uniform, he still remembered to check their identity tablets. Master Taoist Sushin nodded slightly and took out a jade tablet. Hong Yuan personally confirmed it and said respectfully, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. I'll inform Senior Lingxi to open the formation." After obtaining Master Taoist Sushin's permission, Hong Yuan sent a sound-transmitting talisman. Before long, a core formation cultivator wearing Shangqing School's uniform came over with several disciples. He said happily, "Senior Martial Sister Sushin, you're also here." Master Taoist Sushin still looked cold, but her gaze softened a bit. "Junior Martial Brother Lingxi, how's the situation?" Mo Tiange hadn't seen this Master Taoist Lingxi before, but he still looked young, so he must be a talented person. Master Taoist Lingxi said, "Senior Martial Sister, please come in first. We'll talk about the details later." He then led everyone into the formation. The disciples behind him arranged for the foundation building cultivators while he welcomed Master Taoist Sushin into the big tent. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue listened to their respective arrangements, but Master Taoist Sushin was stunned when she entered the tent. There were more than 20 cultivators sitting inside the tent, all of whom were in the core formation realm. Most of them belonged to Shangqing School, but there were also some cultivators from small cultivation groups attached to Shangqing School. This was probably the majority of Shangqing School's cultivators participating in the battle. Why did they gather here? Junior Martial Sister Sushin, you're also here. Master Taoist Shenin sighed when he saw her. Including Sushin, Clear Spring Peak had a total of 7 core formation cultivators. 4 of them were already here, and the number of cultivators from the other peaks was also about the same. Thus, half of Shangqing School's core formation cultivators were already involved in this demonic beast riot. After greeting everyone, Master Taoist Sushin went to sit next to Master Taoist Shenin. "Senior Martial Brother Shenin, how's the situation now?" Master Taoist Shenin shook his head. "Several core formation cultivators died several days ago." "What?" Master Taoist Sushin frowned and glanced around. 7 or 8 core formation cultivators from Shangqing School weren't here. "What about Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan and Junior Martial Brother Shoujing?" Master Taoist Shenin said, "Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan went out to carry out a mission. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing." He paused. Master Taoist Sushin anxiously asked, "What's wrong?" "Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is missing." Master Taoist Shenin furrowed his brows. During the battle a few days ago, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing fought against a 7th rank Radiant Beast. Since then we haven't been able to contact him. There are also other core formation cultivators, but some of them are missing. We're currently discussing this matter. "Missing?" Master Taoist Sushin shook her head and said calmly, "Although a 7th rank Radiant Beast is equivalent to a late-stage core formation cultivator, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing has always been quick-witted and has magic weapons to escape, so his life shouldn't be in danger. I'm afraid he's injured and is hiding somewhere to recuperate." "That's what I think too." Master Taoist Shenin nodded, but the worry on his face didn't diminish. "It's just that the current battle situation is really bad. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is still outside, so I'm still worried." Master Taoist Sushin nodded. After a while she asked, "Senior Martial Brother Shenin, how strong are the opponents? We have so many core formation cultivators, but we actually can't gain the upper hand?" Master Taoist Shenin smiled bitterly. "The opponents have 5 or 6 7th rank demonic beasts, plus more than a dozen 6th and 5th rank demonic beasts. They outnumber us and their cultivation levels are also slightly higher. This is really... They actually have so many 7th-rank demonic beasts? Master Taoist Sushin was shocked. 7th-rank demonic beasts were equivalent to late-stage core formation cultivators, but there weren't many late-stage core formation cultivators among them. Exactly, it's very troublesome. Master Taoist Xianin shook his head. What? Mo Tiange, who was staying in the temporary tent, was shocked when she heard the news Luo Fengxue inquired about. Luo Fengxue continued to say, I heard martial uncle Shoujing was fighting a 7th-rank demonic beast, but he lost contact with him later. It's been 7 or 8 days now. Mo Tiange stopped what she was doing and sat down. What about senior martial brother Qin? He's also missing. Luo Fengxue glanced at her. Don't worry. Didn't you say no news is good news? Mo Tiange sat in a daze for a while then asked, have they looked for him? I only heard that martial uncle Qinyan might have gone to look for martial uncle Shoujing. There's still no news so I'm not sure. Mo Tiange no longer said anything. She held her breath in her heart. She really couldn't let it go, but her reason told her that she couldn't help in this matter and being anxious would be useless. She stood up, thought about it, then sat down again. After repeating this several times, Luo Fengxue finally couldn't stand it anymore. Calm down. With martial uncle Shoujing's cultivation level he'll be fine. I'm not talking about martial uncle Shoujing. Mo Tiange closed her eyes and took a deep breath, but she realized it was futile. Her chest was still thumping. She wanted to rush out but she didn't know what to do. Luo Fengxue looked pensive. After staring at her for a long time she suddenly said, do you like senior martial brother Qin? Mo Tiange was stunned. She shook her head. No, if you don't, why are you in such a hurry? I'm just worried. You don't like him, so what are you worried about? Luo Fengxue frowned and said sternly, Tiange, I advise you that if you really have such thoughts, you should control your heart. I know. Mo Tiange sat down dejectedly. She covered her face and said, I admit I used to, but I know what you want to say. I can also swear that I don't have any delusions right now. I just regard him as a friend. If the one who went missing today was Big Brother Yi or you, I'd also be worried. Luo Fengxue was silent for a long time before she sighed softly. All right, I won't say much, although I think you definitely don't know. Know what? Right after she finished speaking, a voice came from outside. Soon afterward, a woman lifted the curtain and walked in. Eldest martial sister. Upon hearing Luo Fengxue's greeting, Mo Tiange looked up and saw Han Qingyu looking at them with a smile. She hastily stood up and said, Senior martial sister Han. Han Qingyu looked like an amiable and gentle woman. Although she wasn't very beautiful, she was very likable and always had a smile on her face. Luo Fengxue immediately rushed over and shouted in surprise, Eldest martial sister, are you all right? I'm fine. Han Qingyu affectionately patted Luo Fengxue's head. She was much older than Luo Fengxue. According to seniority in the secular world, she was old enough to be Luo Fengxue's great-grandmother. She watched Luo Fengxue grow up and treated her like a junior. After comforting Luo Fengxue, Han Qingyu turned around and said to Mo Tiange with a smile, Tiange, I haven't congratulated you on building your foundation. You must be tired from the journey, right? Mo Tiange smiled and said, Thank you, senior martial sister Han. It's great that you're all right. We were all very worried. Han Qingyu gracefully smiled and sat down. She then softly reprimanded Luo Fengxue. Fengxue, in the future you can't say this kind of thing carelessly. There are a lot of people here. Who knows who might hear you? Luo Fengxue nodded obediently. I understand, eldest martial sister. Han Qingyu smiled and nodded. She then turned around and said to Mo Tiange, I came to see you and tell you about the current situation. Perhaps you'll soon have to face demonic beasts so you can be mentally prepared. Chapter 109. Mo Tiange. Upon hearing her name, Mo Tiange stepped forward. There were 7 or 8 cultivators standing next to her. They were the ones whose names were called and who had to accept the same mission. Master Taoist Xianin solemnly swept his gaze over them and said, Wei Jiaxi will be the leader of your group. Your mission is to rescue injured fellow Taoists. Do you hear me? Yes. Master Taoist Xianin waved his hand and said, Go. Mo Tiange silently followed Wei Jiaxi and left the area. Their group of foundation-building cultivators was either injured or had weak cultivation levels. Obviously, Master Daoist Xianyin deliberately gave them an easy mission. After flying away from Luoyan Cliff, the battle hadn't started yet. The 8 of them stood on the hillside for a while before they saw demonic beasts approaching one after another. Cultivators from Luoyan Cliff also came out to meet them. After a while, Mo Tiange heard Luo Fengxue whisper, "Look over there." Mo Tiange looked up and saw a long-tailed demonic beast in the sky. Judging from its momentum, it was probably in the 5th rank or higher. It was fighting against more than a dozen foundation-building cultivators, but it didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. This long-tailed demonic beast's tail was several feet long. Every time it swung its tail, if someone didn't dodge in time, they would fall from their flying magic tool. Upon seeing this, Wei Jiaxi ordered, "Go and rescue them." The 8 of them each flew towards the heavily injured people and carried them to the back of Luoyan Cliff. Once the battle started, this was the place where the injured were treated. As soon as they carried the injured people over, someone came to greet them. Wei Jiaxi called out, "Senior Martial Brother Kuang." The person who came was also wearing Xianqing School's disciple robes. He was in the peak stage of the foundation-building realm. His attitude was very cold, but his every move was graceful. The person just nodded at Wei Jiaxi, then turned around and called out, "Little Bai." An early-stage foundation-building youngster ran over from behind. "Senior Martial Brother Kuang Zhu." Someone had already taken over the injured people. This Senior Martial Brother Kuang said as he walked inside, "Is the medicine ready? Let's start." The youngster just nodded at them, then went inside. Even though she was treated so coldly, the always arrogant Wei Jiaxi didn't show any displeasure. She just glanced at them and said, "Continue." Mo Tiange followed her and flew away, continuing to cooperate with Luo Fengxue and search for the injured people to bring them to the back. Once they were far away from Wei Jiaxi, Luo Fengxue whispered, "Are you very curious?" Mo Tiange glanced at the battlefield not far away and nodded. Luo Fengxue smiled mysteriously. "Senior Martial Brother Kuang Zhu is the #1 foundation-building disciple. Aside from Martial Uncle Shoujing, he's the most popular male disciple in the group." "Is that so?" Senior Martial Brother Kuang was indeed handsome and elegant. "Isn't that so?" Luo Fengxue sighed when she noticed Mo Tiange was still in a daze. "Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. It's indeed a bit hard on you." Senior Martial Sister Luo. How could Mo Tiange not know that Luo Fengxue was doing this for her own good? However, how could she smile now? Luo Fengxue signaled Mo Tiange that she didn't need to say anything more. The 2 of them continued to search for the wounded in silence. Sometimes when they saw the mangled corpses, Luo Fengxue's face would turn pale, making Mo Tiange very worried. Fortunately, Mo Tiange quickly adapted to the situation. As time went by, the fights of magical power became more and more intense. Occasionally, a 5th rank or higher demonic beast would appear and core formation seniors would fight them. Fights of magical power between cultivators of this level were earth-shattering, so it was inevitable that low-level cultivators would be affected as well. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue had no choice but to split up to rescue people. While they were on their way, a strong wind suddenly swept over them. Mo Tiange, who was standing on her flying sword, lost her balance and almost fell off. She stepped on the flying sword in time and turned a corner, only to see a 3rd-rank demonic beast chasing after them. Cold sweat immediately trickled down her back. The demonic beast's eyes revealed an ominous glint. It clapped its palms together and a red beam of light shot towards them. Mo Tiange controlled her flying sword to dodge everywhere. She held a talisman in one hand and the shuttle of flying Apsara in the other and threw it out. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden light, then into a thin ray of light, flying towards the demonic beast in a dense formation. A 3rd-rank demonic beast was equivalent to a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator. Ever since Mo Tiange broke through, she hadn't fought with others. At this moment, she carefully controlled the shuttle of flying Apsara while throwing talismans in her other hand. These talismans were given to her by Martial Uncle Xianyin before they left. When they arrived here, she and Luo Fengxue went to greet him and he gave them many more talismans to protect them. Wind and rain rustling, and wind blowing clouds chaotic. Several high-level wind element talismans were thrown at the demonic beast, forcing it to take a few steps back. Emotienga immediately withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara and controlled her flying sword to flee at full speed. However, demonic beasts had thick skin, so the power of the attacks was often reduced when they landed on their bodies. She was only a breath late, so the demonic beast caught up with her again. Emotienga turned her head to look around. The fight was in full swing, so no one came to help her. Moreover, the demonic beast was extremely fast. Just as it was about to catch up, she raised her hand and released the shuttle of flying Apsara again. This demonic beast was already a third-rank demonic beast, so its intelligence was different from that of wild animals. It knew the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara, so it immediately slapped its front paw, releasing a fire element spell from its palm. Emotienga controlled her flying sword to circle around the demonic beast. She released the shuttle of flying Apsara from time to time, restraining the demonic beast's movements. Whenever the demonic beast attacked, she would retreat a bit. While it was casting its spell, she would control the golden ray to stab it. After repeating this several times, the demonic beast was enraged and went berserk. Emotienga was greatly alarmed when flames came crashing down from the sky. She didn't expect this demonic beast could actually use this kind of spell. She quickly moved forward to avoid it, but she felt a sharp pain in her back. She couldn't avoid it and was burned. Emotienga trembled and almost lost control of the shuttle of flying Apsara. Just as the demonic beast's huge paw was about to hit her again, a flying sword suddenly flew from the side and firmly pierced the demonic beast's head. The demonic beast cried out in pain. Emotienga seized this opportunity and withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara. All the golden rays pierced the demonic beast's head. She then pointed her finger and the golden rays broke through its body. The demonic beast roared and finally fell to the ground. Emotienga turned her head and saw Wei Jiaxi's cold figure. "Thank you, Senior Martial Sister Wei." Emotienga cupped her hands gratefully. Wei Jiaxi humphed softly but didn't answer. Instead she turned around and left. Emotienga couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although she saved her, this Senior Martial Sister Wei still hated her. However, as she watched Wei Jiaxi's back, Emotienga gradually frowned. This direction, Emotienga didn't have time to think carefully. Ignoring the pain in her back, she followed Wei Jiaxi. When she was fighting the demonic beast just now, she had already left the main battlefield. She originally thought Wei Jiaxi just happened to pass by, but now it seemed that this wasn't the case. Although she seemed to be chasing a demonic beast, Emotienga knew Wei Jiaxi was in charge of treating the injured, so she didn't need to do this. After walking for a short distance, Emotienga saw Luo Fengshue's figure. After thinking for a moment, she sent her a sound-transmitting talisman. Luo Fengxue received the sound-transmitting talisman. She looked up and found Emotienga's location, then flew over. "What's the matter, Tienga?" Emotienga pointed in the distance and said, "Look, it's Senior Martial Sister Wei." Luo Fengxue glanced at her but still didn't understand. "What's wrong with Senior Martial Sister Wei? Look at the direction she's going." Luo Fengxue turned her head and carefully observed for a while. Her expression suddenly changed. "Senior Martial Sister Wei is leaving." Emotienga nodded. "Senior Martial Sister Wei is injured. She doesn't have to fight this time, so why chase the demonic beast? There's no one in that direction." Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment, then said, "Let's follow her and take a look." This. Emotienga hesitated for a moment. "We still have to look for our injured companions. We're not the only team in charge of looking for the injured. Besides, the battle is about to end, so it'll be fine if we're not here." Emotienga looked around and confirmed that the outcome of the battle had already been decided. She nodded and said, "All right." The two of them then restrained their breaths and followed Wei Jiaxi at a leisurely pace. After crossing several low peaks and entering a dense forest, Wei Jiaxi's flying sword suddenly sped up, blocking the path of a second-rank demonic beast that was running ahead of them. A small flag appeared in her hand. She waved the flag, and with a thunderous sound, the demonic beast in front of her fell down in an instant. Emotienga and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other. Both of them were even more certain that Wei Jiaxi was clearly capable of killing this demonic beast, yet she kept chasing it through the forest. There was definitely a problem. Sure enough, after she killed the demonic beast, she didn't turn back. Instead, she continued to move forward. Her speed was so fast that the two of them almost couldn't keep up. The trees became denser and denser and they went deeper and deeper into the forest. After an unknown amount of time, Wei Jiaxi finally stopped. She looked around, seemingly looking for something. This won't do. Luo Fengxue said in a low voice. This place is very far from Luoyan Cliff. It's too dangerous. We have to call second martial sister back first. Mo Tiange quickly pulled her back. But if you call her back now, we won't know what she wants to do. Luo Fengxue stared at Mo Tiange with bright eyes and asked seriously, Tiange, are you suspecting that second martial sister is? Of course not. Mo Tiange interrupted her with a conflicted expression. Senior martial sister Wei just saved me. I know that although her temper isn't good, she's not a bad person. However, her current behavior is really too strange. Luo Fengxue was silent for a moment before she said, no matter what second martial sister wants to do, I believe her. After she finished speaking, she chased after Wei Jiaxi. Mo Tiange wanted to stop her, but her actions had already startled Wei Jiaxi. She had no choice but to follow her. Second martial sister. When Wei Jiaxi saw them, her expression turned cold. You, second martial sister. Luo Fengxue looked around. There seemed to be traces of fights of magical powers. What are you looking for? Wei Jiaxi said coldly, it's none of your business. Luo Fengxue suddenly turned around and stared at Wei Jiaxi. Second martial sister, are you looking for martial uncle Shoujing? When she said this, not only Wei Jiaxi but Mo Tiange was also shocked. Luo Fengxue said slowly, I heard that martial uncle Shoujing disappeared in this direction a few days ago. At that time he told you foundation building disciples to go back first. There were also traces of fights of magical powers here, so I guessed you must be looking for martial uncle Shoujing. Wei Jiaxi's expression changed. In the end she clenched her teeth and said, what I want to do is none of your business. Fengxue, go back. I won't go back. Luo Fengxue stared at her resolutely. Second martial sister, wake up. Martial uncle Shoujing is completely different from us. Some things can't be done just because you want to. Wei Jiaxi humphed. I don't want to do anything. If you don't want to do anything, then come back with us. Martial uncle Shoujing's whereabouts are naturally in martial uncle Qingyuan's hands. What's the use of you sneaking out? Even if martial uncle Qingyuan can't find him, can you? Perhaps because Luo Fengshue's accusing tone angered her, anger appeared on Wei Jiaxi's face. I told you it has nothing to do with you. Then martial uncle Shoujing also has nothing to do with you. Luo Fengxue showed no mercy. Second martial sister, you're such a proud person, so why can't you see past this? Think about it yourself. Your aptitude isn't worse than eldest martial sister's. Eldest martial sister entered the late stage of the foundation building realm 10 years ago, but you're still in the middle stage now. Do you think Master doesn't know? Master just wants you to realize it yourself. Luo Fengxue. Unable to restrain her anger, Wei Jiaxi glared at them. Chapter 110. Luo Fengxue sneered. She had always been smooth and slick, never arguing with people face to face, but now she couldn't care less. She looked at Wei Jiaxi with ridicule in her eyes and said, Second senior martial sister, not to mention martial uncle Shoujing, even I don't like your current appearance. Wei Jiaxi was originally a beautiful woman, but right now she was so angry that her face was distorted. She stretched out her hand and a small scarlet flag appeared in her hand. Luo Fengxue didn't attack, but she didn't show any weakness. She took another step forward and said, Could it be that you want to attack a fellow disciple? Second senior martial sister, you can't keep making mistakes. Wei Jiaxi looked like she was struggling. Sometimes she was angry, sometimes she was regretful, but in the end she put away the flag. Seeing her like this, Luo Fengshue's expression softened a bit. She said slowly, I've been under Master's tutelage since I was a child. When I was young, second senior martial sister and eldest senior martial sister always took care of me, played with me and taught me how to cultivate. Second senior martial sister, you're such a smart and respectable person. Although we're not very close now, I still don't want to see you make mistakes. Second senior martial sister, think about it carefully. Martial uncle Shoujing is in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. With his cultivation speed, it's very likely that he'll form his nascent soul within 100 years. If he forms his nascent soul, why would he still care about a foundation building disciple? Don't you know that aside from cultivating, martial uncle Shoujing doesn't like anything else? If your cultivation level can't catch up to his, why would he even care about you? Once Luo Fengxue said this, shock appeared in Wei Jiaxi's eyes. She then looked at Mo Tiange again. Mo Tiange didn't understand. She knew Wei Jiaxi's gaze meant she was afraid of her, but she already heard most of it. What else couldn't she hear? While Mo Tiange was puzzled, Luo Fengxue already understood Wei Jiaxi's meaning. She turned around and said, Tiange, this place is far from Luoyan Cliff. There might be demonic beasts nearby. Can you help us keep a lookout? Mo Tiange immediately understood what Luo Fengxue meant. The relationship between the two of them was deeper than hers, so maybe there was something inconvenient to say in front of her. Thus, Mo Tiange nodded and said, You guys talk first. I'll go take a look. Luo Fengxue responded, but her eyes were filled with gratitude. Mo Tiange chuckled, then turned around and left. Once Mo Tiange's silhouette disappeared, Luo Fengxue waved her hand. A soundproof barrier immediately appeared, surrounding the two of them. Senior Martial Sister, if you have something to say, just say it. Maybe you've misunderstood something. Wei Jiaxi, who had been staring at the direction Mo Tiange left, had a complicated look in her eyes. At that moment she lowered her gaze and said in a low voice, Fengxue, since you already know, I won't hide it from you. I originally didn't dare to have too many delusions, but ever since she came... Senior Martial Sister, are you saying that Martial Uncle Shoujing treats Tiange differently? Wei Jiaxi nodded. She then smiled bitterly and said, I know you've always looked down on me regarding this matter, but how could I be willing to let others look down on me? It's just that you've never experienced love, so you don't understand. Luo Fengxue approached Mo Tiange, then said calmly, Second Martial Sister, I did have some complaints about this before, so I hope you can forgive me. Although I don't understand matters of the heart, I know that we aren't mortal women. Naturally, we can't be like mortals. In the cultivation world, the only criterion is one's cultivation level. Martial Uncle Shoujing hasn't taken women seriously for so many years, but it's not necessarily because there aren't any women worthy of his attention. Senior Martial Sister, don't tell me it's not because Martial Uncle Shoujing is different from ordinary male disciples? Wei Jiaxi was silent. Luo Fengshue's words were straightforward, but she couldn't deny it. Not to mention Martial Uncle Shoujing's appearance and identity. These things were, after all, superficial, but why did she have feelings for him? Wei Jiaxi carefully recalled. At first she saw that this martial uncle wasn't much older than them, but he was able to purify his heart, restrain his desires and wholeheartedly cultivate, so she secretly admired him. Later, when she saw that his way of doing things was indeed different from disciples like them and that his cultivation level was even faster, she gradually submitted to him. What if his cultivation level wasn't high? What would happen to me? Wei Jiaxi actually felt a chill run down her spine as she thought about this. She had always thought highly of herself, but only now did she realize that she was actually the same as those women. Second Martial Sister. Wei Jiaxi regained her train of thought and shook her head gently. I'm fine. Luo Fengxue stared at her worriedly. What are you thinking about? Wei Jiaxi was momentarily speechless. After hesitating for a long time, she finally said, Fengxue, do you think I'm as frivolous as those female disciples? Because Martial Uncle is young and has a high cultivation level, so... It's nothing. Luo Fengxue smiled and said, Martial Uncle Shoujing's way of doing things is indeed very different from Senior Martial Brothers, so he's naturally likable. Senior Martial Sister, you know that I don't really like cultivating, but I'm very interested in wielding power. That's why I can see things clearly. You're the smart one. Wei Jiaxi looked at the direction Mo Tiange left and asked in a low voice, Fengxue, you've always been close to her. Do you know if Martial Uncle really... Before Wei Jiaxi could finish, Luo Fengxue shook her head and said, Second Martial Sister, don't think too much. I don't believe Martial Uncle Shoujing has any feelings for Tiange. But why did Martial Uncle hide his identity from her? Luo Fengxue also looked puzzled. I think Martial Uncle Shoujing must have his own intentions. But if he really had any intentions, why did he let Tiange cultivate with us? I saw some of the treasures on her body indeed belonged to Martial Uncle. However, even though Martial Uncle Shoujing's concocting skills are superb, I've never seen any medicinal pills on Tiange. Her disciples' rations are the same as ours. It's just that Grandmaster bestowed some things to her. Wei Jiaxi was silent for a long time before Luo Fengxue said, "Second martial sister, don't be suspicious of Tienge. Ever since she came I've been with her so I know everything about her. I'll tell you the truth, she's actually the same kind of person as martial uncle Shoujing. She has a firm will and wholeheartedly cultivates. Right now she doesn't have any intentions, but if you're still like this she'll definitely leave you behind in the future. At that time martial uncle Shoujing might really look at her in a different light." Wei Jiaxi looked shocked as she stared at Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue smiled bitterly and said with a sigh, "Senior martial sister, don't think I'm just trying to scare you. Tienge has been here for a long time and she's the closest to me. I don't have any other skills but I've always been very good at judging people. With Tienge's temperament, it's only a matter of time before she reaches the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Right now she's Grandmaster's registered disciple. As long as Grandmaster takes good care of her, why would she need to worry about not being able to form her gold core? Martial uncle Shoujing's talent is outstanding. In Xianqing school the only core formation martial uncle who's the same age as him is martial uncle Lingxi, but martial uncle Lingxi is a man. If martial uncle Shoujing really forms his nascent soul within 100 years and he wants to perform dual cultivation, where would he find a suitable nascent soul cultivator? At that time he'd probably only be able to choose female cultivators in the core formation realm, and they'd also have to be female cultivators with hopes of forming their nascent soul. Second martial sister, if you don't form your gold core, you won't have any hope." At this point, Wei Jiaxi already understood that she'd taken the wrong path. Without a cultivation level, martial uncle Shoujing wouldn't even spare her a glance. If she couldn't form her gold core she'd be left behind. Alas, all these years she'd actually cast aside her most important cultivation level and neglected the essentials to pursue trifles. "Fengxue, thank you." Wei Jiaxi suddenly felt as if she'd been enlightened. She suddenly felt relaxed. All these years she'd been carrying her feelings on her back, but she didn't dare to let others know. She couldn't abandon them, couldn't bear to part with them. Even her pride and self-esteem had been lost in this difficult pursuit, but she'd forgotten the source of her pride and self-esteem. Without a cultivation level, what right did she have to be proud? What right did she have to make others look at her differently? Upon hearing what Wei Jiaxi said, Luo Fengxue heaved a sigh of relief. Her taut nerves finally relaxed. This place was far from Luoyan Cliff, and there were many demonic beasts in the dense forest. She'd actually been worried. But Wei Jiaxi hesitated. "Martial uncle Shoujing has disappeared. I didn't come here because I was delusional, but my heart is really restless. Second martial sister." Luo Fengxue said anxiously, "You're really not as good as Tienge. Tienge is also worried, but she knows her own limits. She's wholeheartedly waiting for martial uncle Qingyuan's news. If she acted like you, wouldn't she be giving master more trouble?" Wei Jiaxi suddenly frowned. "What do you mean? Didn't you say Tienge doesn't have?" Luo Fengxue realized she said the wrong thing, but she still said calmly, "She thinks it's senior martial brother Qin. But senior martial sister, don't think too much. Tienge only thinks of him as a friend." "Is that so?" Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly took out her flying sword and took out her magic tool. "Second martial sister." Luo Fengxue turned pale with fright. Wei Jiaxi didn't say anything. Her expression was cold and solemn, but a murderous intent emerged in her eyes. She raised her flying sword and the flag at the same time. Luo Fengxue hurriedly took out her own magic tool, but in the next moment she heard a loud bang. She turned her head and was stunned. While controlling the flying sword, Wei Jiaxi chanted an incantation. Soon afterward she pointed her spiritual aura at the flag. In an instant the flag expanded and flashed with lightning. "Fengxue," she shouted. "Why are you in a daze? There are demonic beasts." Luo Fengxue finally regained her senses. She couldn't help but feel ashamed. She thought her senior martial sister wanted to fight second and third rank demonic beasts. Sensing the breaths of demonic beasts approaching one after another, Luo Fengxue was shocked. The second rank was the early stage of the foundation building realm, while the third rank was the middle stage of the foundation building realm. One of them was in the early stage of the foundation building realm, while the other was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. The difference in numbers was too big. Wei Jiaxi, who was standing on her flying sword, grabbed a few things and stuffed them into Luo Fengxue's hands. she said anxiously. Quick. I'll hold them off for a while. You go find Emotienga and run back with her. No, Senior Marshal Sister, you're alone. Go quickly. Wei Jiaxi shouted. She glanced at the approaching demonic beasts and said anxiously, if you don't leave now, it'll be too late. You've just made a realm breakthrough and you're not good at fights of magical powers. If you stay here, you'll only drag me down. Quickly go back and find someone to save her. But, halfway through her words, the breaths of demonic beasts were getting closer and closer. Senior Marshal Sister, come with me. Oh, they're too fast. If they come, none of us will be able to escape. Hurry up and be obedient. Luo Fengxue was a decisive person. She immediately clenched her teeth and said, all right, Senior Marshal Sister, hold on. She then turned around and dashed towards the direction Emotienga left. However, whether it was with her divine sense or her eyes, she couldn't find any trace of Emotienga. Tienga. Luo Fengxue shouted anxiously, quickly come out. There are demonic beasts. However, her surroundings were quiet. It was as if Emotienga had disappeared. There was no response at all. Chapter 111. Emotienga knew there must be a formation in front of her, but she couldn't figure it out. Just now, when Luo Fengxue and Wei Jiaxing talked alone, she left alone, planning to find a place that was neither too far nor too close to keep a lookout for them. However, she accidentally found traces of a formation nearby. That wasn't a big deal, but even with her attainments in formations, she couldn't see what this formation was, let alone break it. She had no choice but to go back to look for the two of them. Unexpectedly, she had already fallen into a formation without realizing it and couldn't leave. Everything in front of her was white as if she was in a fog. She couldn't see anything clearly. Emotienga pondered for a moment, then stopped moving. Instead, she sat cross-legged and spread her divine sense. Since she had entered the foundation building realm, she had explored several kilometers with her divine sense. Since this was a formation, this distance was enough to find the eye of the formation. However, just as she spread her divine sense, the fog around her seemed to be alive. It surged everywhere and blocked her divine sense. She opened her eyes and frowned deeply. No, this formation in front of me is so brilliant. It's definitely not laid by demonic beasts with low intelligence. Is there an expert or senior hiding here? A thought flashed through her mind. She thought of a possibility and shouted, Marshal Uncle Shoujing, is Marshal Uncle Shoujing here? Her voice slowly dispersed in the fog. Emotienga waited for a while, but she didn't hear a reply. Did she guess wrong? She thought for a moment, then slowly walked forward. This fog was like a cloud so thick that it was almost solid. She only walked a few steps, but she found that it was the same everywhere. She couldn't tell the path and couldn't walk. At that moment, a faint light flashed. She moved sideways and a lightning bolt fell on the ground next to her, leaving a scorched mark. Emotienga was shocked. She looked around vigilantly but didn't find any other traces. Behind her, the fog gradually condensed into a human figure walking towards her. Emotienga trembled all over and lowered her body. This time it was a flying sword stuck in the ground. She followed the direction of the flying sword and turned around. Shocked, she blurted out, "Second uncle." She saw a long-bearded old man in cyan clothes standing in the fog several feet away. It was Yi Zhang's appearance before he was injured. Nevertheless, in the next second, Emotienga became even more vigilant. She knew second uncle was already dead, so the person in front of her was definitely not second uncle. Could it be that this cloud could actually copy people from her imagination? She didn't have the time to think before Yi Zhang raised his hand and withdrew a jade disc. Emotienga broke out in a cold sweat when she saw this jade plate. This was second uncle's thick soil plate, which was refined by her father after he formed his gold core. Its power was extraordinary, but when they were escaping from Mount Yunwu, second uncle forcibly attacked, so this thick soil plate was already broken. She was even more certain that this was just a copy of a character based on her impression. However, this formation could actually copy a character from one's imagination, and it could even transform into an artifact. It was quite amazing. Looking at that flying sword just now, its power was probably real. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead, but she didn't even have time to wipe it away. With a wave of her hand, she summoned the shuttle of soaring Apsara. If this second uncle's illusion really had the same power as when he was alive, she was afraid that she would be killed on the spot if she was not careful. The jade plate floated in the air. Yi Zhang's face was expressionless as he formed hand seals and muttered incantations. Streams of spiritual energy continuously struck the jade plate, causing it to swell up like a mat. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange knew this thick soil plate's weakness. This thing was called thick soil, so it naturally had the earth attribute. The earth was thick and solid. If she waited until the spiritual energy was completely injected, this jade plate would directly smash down with enough power to make her suffer. However, this thing needed time to increase its power. If she attacked first and seized the initiative, she could restrain it. Immediately, the shuttle of soaring Apsara turned into a golden net and flew directly towards this illusion. Ah! The golden net firmly stabbed into the illusion, causing it to let out a blood-curdling scream. Mo Tiange's hands couldn't help but tremble when she saw second uncle's pained expression. Once she moved, she discovered that this illusion didn't have the reaction speed of a real person, but it was too similar. She clearly knew the second uncle in front of her was fake, but he looked so similar that she almost couldn't bear to attack him. All of a sudden, a malicious glint flashed in the illusion's eyes. He pointed his finger, causing the enlarged thick soil plate to suddenly smash down on her. Mo Tiange's figure flashed. In an instant she was already several dozen feet away. She clasped her hands together and heard another painful scream. The golden light broke through the illusion's body, and the second uncle in front of her gradually faded away. The thick soil plate also broke inch by inch and disappeared. Mo Tiange wiped the sweat on her face and slowly calmed down. A fake was a fake after all. Second uncle wouldn't look at her like that, and he also wouldn't attack her. She turned around and took 2 steps, but she was stunned again. A person stood several dozen feet away from her. He had handsome eyebrows and a gloomy expression. It was Qin Shi. Mo Tiange instantly released the shuttle of soaring Apsara. However, unlike second uncle, this Qin Shi illusion didn't react to her attack. Instead, he raised his hand, causing the golden light to converge and transform into the shuttle of soaring Apsara again. He caught it in his hand. Mo Tiange was shocked. Ever since she obtained the shuttle of soaring Apsara, she knew the power of this thing. When scattered, it could form a formation. When gathered, it could form a needle. It had form but no substance, and it could kill people without leaving a trace. She grasped the formation to control this thing and refined it for a long time, so how could it be easily taken away by someone? But this was just a fleeting thought. Now wasn't the time to think about this matter. She fumbled in her Qinkuan bag and took out a flying sword and several small flying daggers. The flying daggers were originally the iron-teethed crocodile's fangs. After she built her foundation, she refined them into magic tools in Xianqing School's tool refining shop. Although they weren't very powerful, they were good for sneak attacks. The flying sword faced the enemy head-on while the flying daggers launched a sneak attack from behind. Qin Shi didn't use the shuttle of soaring Apsara. Instead, he took out a sword. It was the sword with an astonishing momentum she once saw. The sword was golden in color and was covered in pulsating flames. The sword lightly swung, knocking her flying sword down. Then it flicked again, knocking all the flying daggers away. Mo Tiange was stunned. Although she still had magic tools on her, she hadn't refined them yet. Right now, she could only hurriedly take out several defensive talismans and put them on her body. She also took out a wind spell talisman and threw it out. By the time she finished doing all these, Qin Shi's sword had already arrived. In an instant it split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, all of which directly attacked Mo Tiange from different directions. Mo Tiange simply didn't have enough time to react. She could only watch helplessly as the sword pierced her body. However, she didn't feel the pain she expected. Instead, her body felt lighter and the sword's might vanished in a flash. The Qin Shi in front of her also gradually dissipated, and the shuttle of soaring Apsara fell. Mo Tiange was still in a state of shock. After thinking for a moment, she understood. The person was fake and the surrounding environment was also fake, so the attack was also fake. It was just an illusion created by relying on spiritual aura fluctuations. She made up her mind and retrieved her flying sword, shuttle of soaring Apsara and other things. She then sat down cross-legged and slowly recovered her spiritual aura. At this moment, a person once again appeared in front of her. It was the already dead Su Jingji. She didn't know who killed Su Jingji in the fight for the foundation building pill. After that, she was faced with a lot of problems, so she never thought about him again. Now that she saw Su Jingji, she couldn't help but feel her heart fluctuate. However, a moment later she adjusted her state of mind. She closed her eyes and concentrated on adjusting her breath. She sensed Su Jingji's talisman flying towards her, but she didn't move. She was already in the foundation building realm now, so Su Jingji's attack was very weak. The moment the talisman came into contact with her body, it swayed and disappeared along with Su Jingji. After that, Murong Yen's senior martial brother Zhou Luo Fengxue, and the others appeared one by one. Since Mo Tiange had already comprehended the mystery behind the talisman, she just pretended she didn't see anything and sat in meditation in silence. When she opened her eyes again, the scenery in front of her was no longer the indistinct sea of fog and clouds. Instead, it was a vast expanse of yellow sand and the scorching sun. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then stood up and looked around. Boundless yellow sand, the sun hanging high in the sky, and the fierce wind, it looked very much like the desert in the west of the celestial pole. She once again released her divine sense, but she discovered that it spread out without any hindrance. Feeling this, Mo Tiange was pleasantly surprised. She immediately closed her eyes and concentrated on exploring with her divine sense. Soon a smile appeared on her face. The eye of the formation. She found the eye of the formation. After carefully sensing her surroundings, Mo Tiange opened her eyes and judged her direction. According to her divine sense, the eye of the formation was located about half a mile away. This distance was very reasonable. If she could reach the eye of the formation, she should be able to escape. The yellow sand under her feet was extremely soft. When she stepped on it, it sank up to her knees. Like walking on snow, every step was extremely difficult. She originally wanted to fly, but she discovered she couldn't fly in this place. She could only calm down and move forward one step at a time. The wind blew up the yellow sand, making whooshing sounds and fiercely hitting her face, making her feel extremely painful. The scorching sun shone on her body, making her feel like her whole body was burning. Mo Tiange was stunned when she sensed this. She was already a foundation-building cultivator now, so she was immune to heat and cold. Why did she feel uncomfortable being shone by the sun and hurt being hit by the gale? Realizing this problem, she immediately wanted to move the spiritual aura in her body to arrange a defensive barrier around her. However, she was stunned. Her body was completely empty. Whether it was her dantian or meridians, there was no spiritual aura at all. After standing for a while, Mo Tiange's face was covered in sweat. This formation actually turned her into a mortal. She wiped the sweat from her face and put her hand into her Qianquan bag. It was useless. Opening the Qianquan bag required a bit of spiritual aura, but now she didn't even have this bit of spiritual aura. She couldn't use her Qianquan bag, she had nothing on her body and she had no spiritual aura, so she couldn't cast a single spell. Now she could only use her divine sense. However, her soul-refining technique hadn't reached its peak yet, so it was useless. After thinking for a while, she calmed down and continued to walk step by step towards the eye of the formation. In any case, if she found the eye of the formation, there would definitely be a turning point. After walking for a while with her head down, Mo Tiange turned around and saw that the sand and wind had gradually covered her footprints in the direction she came from. She closed her eyes again to sense her position, but what she saw shocked her once again. The distance of that position didn't change at all. She thought quickly. Could it be that she didn't go out at all? But the footprints were real. Then could it be that the position changed? Thinking of this, her face couldn't help but turn pale. If that was the case, she didn't have the ability to resist at all. Calm down, calm down. Mo Tiange muttered in her heart. She then took a deep breath and began to think from the beginning. This formation was obviously an illusory formation, but it was a fact that she had no spiritual aura right now. How could she break this formation? There was no killing intent around her. The scorching sun, the yellow sand, and the gale were a kind of torment. This was either a trap or a test of her willpower. After thinking for a while, she clenched her teeth and continued to walk forward. If she didn't move, it would be a trap, but if she moved, she might have a chance to survive. Step by step, she didn't know how long she had been walking. Her vision started to blur, but her willpower remained firm and she clenched her teeth. Her hands were so sore that she almost couldn't lift her legs. The wind became stronger and the sun became hotter. Finally, her body went limp. She fell to the ground and passed out. After a long time, the sky seemed to be torn apart. A crack appeared and a man wearing a Taoist robe floated in from the outside. He muttered in a low voice, "The little girl isn't bad. She actually persisted for this long. Aling, for your sake, I won't make things difficult for her." Chapter 112. It was dark in front of her. Her primordial spirit was sleeping in her Dantian's sea of consciousness. Emotianga vaguely heard some voices. "Aling, does this little girl really have your spiritual roots of the origin?" It was a man's voice. It was deep, clear, and very pleasing to the ear. It sounded like he wasn't very old. "Haven't you seen it yourself? Why are you asking me?" This voice was clearer and sharper. It should belong to a younger man. He sounded a bit impatient. Hearing this, the first person said, "I'm just asking." The man called Aling let out a humph. Right after that, Emotianga felt a powerful force rushing into her meridians. She couldn't help but moan, not because of pain but because of numbness. This force was extremely powerful. When it rushed into her meridians, she felt like her meridians were no longer under her control. However, this force was warm and made her feel very comfortable. Spiritual roots of the origin, pure Yin constitution. "Alas, I don't know if I should say she's lucky or unlucky," Aling muttered. "What do you mean by lucky and unlucky?" The first man was curious. Aling answered, "You should know the cultivation method of spiritual roots of the origin. There are only two words: balance and permanence. The whole body is regarded as a universe. The 5 elements generate each other and Yin and Yang balance each other. However, people with pure Yin constitution have Yin and no Yang in their bodies. Solitary Yin doesn't grow and solitary Yang doesn't grow. So this little girl's spiritual roots of the origin won't have any benefits? That's not true. Pure Yin is also divided into 5 elements. She can completely cultivate the balance of the 5 elements of pure Yin first before considering other things." "You want to teach her the art of the origin? Since she's my descendant, I should take care of her. Besides, she has my spiritual roots of the origin. How can I just ignore her?" I'm afraid it's because of your incomparably charming Miss Yaoqing, right?" Hearing such sour words, Aling was furious. "In any case, she left behind my bloodline. Can you give me a child? If you can give me a child, I'll immediately throw this girl out." "Ah." The man begged for mercy. "I was just saying. Don't be angry." "Humph." After a moment of silence, Aling said, "Her foundation in the art of Sunu is quite good. It'd be a pity to cripple it. If she switched to cultivating my Taiyuan record now, it'd be very difficult for her to achieve the desired cultivation effect. Alas, if she performed dual cultivation with a man with a pure Yang constitution, she'd be able to artificially create a Yin and Yang balance." As soon as he said that, the man immediately shouted, "Don't look at me. I didn't even like your Miss Yaoqing back then, let alone this little girl who's still wet behind the ears. Besides, I don't even know which generation this girl is your descendant. This is too unethical." Aling was furious again. "Get lost. Do you think there's no one else with a pure Yang constitution besides you? What kind of filthy things are in his head?" Mo Tiange wanted to wake up, but her primordial spirit seemed to be extremely exhausted. Not only did it have no reaction at all, but her remaining consciousness was also fuzzy. In the end, she once again passed out. When she finally regained consciousness, she abruptly sat up. What she saw was a small wooden hut with a wooden bed, a wooden cabinet, a bamboo chair and a bamboo cup. She didn't know what kind of spiritual plant it was, but it was full of spiritual aura, almost visible to the naked eye. Not only that, but the surrounding spiritual aura was several times denser than in her immortal's cave on Mount Taikong. What kind of place was this? She looked down and found that her body was intact. Even the burn on her back from fighting demonic beasts was no longer painful. The spiritual aura in her body not only recovered, but also seemed to be a bit stronger. She suddenly remembered the 2 voices she heard when she was in a daze. Aling, spiritual root of the origin, Yaoqing, and descendant. When these words were connected, the answer was obvious. The Mo family's ancestor was the other ancestor Mo Yaoqing mentioned. Mo Tiange held her head, wondering if it was just a dream. Mo Yaoqing said she was a person from thousands of years ago who eventually died of old age. Mo Yaoqing herself was a nascent soul cultivator, and these 2 people were also nascent soul cultivators. It was impossible for them to live thousands of years longer than Mo Yaoqing. Or were they ghosts? Or were they unknown existences? She patted her head, got out of bed, pushed the door open and slowly walked out of the small room. In the distance there were green mountains, the fragrance of flowers, several wooden houses, a pond and two men. It was a picturesque scene. While she was still in a daze, the two men sitting under the tree playing chess turned their heads. "Little girl, you're awake? Come and sit." Mo Tiange looked over. The one talking to her was a handsome man in a Taoist robe. He was currently holding a chess piece with a smile on his face. The person sitting opposite him was also a young man, but he looked a bit younger. His face still retained the sharpness and elegance of a youth. At first glance she only felt that these two people were as deep as the sea. They didn't reveal anything and she couldn't tell what realm their cultivation levels were. However, this kind of momentum meant they must be senior experts, so she didn't dare to be frivolous. She approached them in a well-behaved manner and saluted them. "Junior Mo Tiange greets the two seniors." "Mo Tiange?" The man who spoke before turned his head and looked at the young man opposite him. "You're really surnamed Mo. It seems you're undoubtedly Miss Yaoqing's descendant." Upon hearing their conversation, Mo Tiange knew the conversation she heard while she was in a daze wasn't a dream. She immediately looked at the other young man. Was this person Aling, the other ancestor Mo Yaoqing mentioned? The young man looked pensive. After staring at her for a long time he finally said, "Junior, tell me about your background." When Mo Tiange heard his voice, it was indeed exactly the same as Aling. Too many thoughts flashed through her mind, but she only thought about it for a moment before she said, "Junior's ancestor indeed has a person named Yaoqing. May I ask if Senior is this another ancestor of mine?" The two people glanced at each other. The young man said slowly, "As soon as you entered the illusory sky formation, I knew you were my descendant. You have an ancestor named Mo Yaoqing, that's right." Mo Tiange's mood surged when she heard the confirmation. She brushed her clothes and knelt down. Mo Tiange greets Senior Great Ancestor. Junior didn't know and couldn't salute. "Please forgive me, Great Ancestor. May I ask Great Ancestor's name?" The young man showed a faint smile. He gently flicked his sleeve and a powerful force lifted her up. "My name is Zhong Muling and my Taoist name is Chiling. I'm your ancestor, so I have no qualms accepting your kneeling. However, I've never taken care of you, so you don't have to be so polite." Once Zhong Muling finished speaking, the man opposite him smiled and said, "Little girl, you're quite polite." Mo Tiange then turned around and asked, "May I ask how I should address you, Senior?" The man answered, "My name is Yuan Bao. You can call me by my full name. Don't call me Senior Yuan." "So it's Senior Yuan Bao. Since you're someone close to my great ancestor, you're also Junior Senior." Mo Tiange bowed deeply. Her behavior left a good impression on Yuan Bao. He smiled and said, "That'll do. You're Aling's descendant, so you naturally have your own benefits. You don't have to be so polite. Sit." Mo Tiange turned to look at Zhong Muling. Seeing him nodding slightly, she finally sat down on another stone bench. A shocking thought appeared in her mind, and it was most likely true. Mo Yaoqing passed away several thousand years ago with her nascent soul cultivation level. These two people lived at the same time, but they lived until now, so their cultivation levels were most likely above the nascent soul realm. That was the deification realm. Yuan Bao stared at her, then said to Zhong Muling with a smile, "This little girl is very smart. It seems she already knows our cultivation levels." Zhong Muling raised the corners of his lips and nodded with satisfaction. "You're my descendant, so how can you be too stupid? Girl, I've been away from the secular world for many years. I occasionally go back, so I know you have a Mo family's village now. It's just that you're too young, so I didn't see it last time. I didn't expect there to be a descendant with spiritual roots in these past few decades who even set foot on the path of cultivation. You're in your 20s now? Judging from your clothes, you seem to have entered Xianqing school? This ancestor has actually been taking care of the Mo family?" A thought flashed through Mo Tiange's mind. She answered cautiously, "Great ancestor, I'm in my 20s now. I'm indeed a disciple of Xianqing school." "Your art of Sinu was passed down by Mo Yaoqing? Tell me, how did you set foot on the path to immortality?" Mo Tiange felt strange listening to Zhong Muling's words. According to his conversation with Yuan Bao and the words Mo Yaoqing left in her mind years ago, The two of them should be husband and wife. How could he mention Mo Yaoqing in such a relaxed and distant manner as if they didn't have any feelings between husband and wife? She didn't ask this question and just answered first, yes. When I was a child, I accidentally entered the Mo family's ancestral hall. I triggered the restriction and obtained the art of Sinu's inheritance. She told him everything from when she was 7 years old, how she started cultivating, how she was deceived, how she went to Kunwu, how she wandered with second uncle, how she entered Yunwu sect, how her second uncle passed away, how she went to Shenqing school, how she built her foundation, the demonic beast riot. When she finally finished talking, both Zhong Muling and Yuan Bao's expressions darkened. How can I, Zhong Muling, allow my descendant to be bullied? After a long time, Zhong Muling finally said this. He then turned to Mo Tiange and said, "Take out the jade pendant that conceals your physique." Mo Tiange answered. She then reached for the jade pendant around her neck, untied it and handed it over to Yuan Bao. "Oh, this is an excellent spirit-concealing pendant." Taoist Yuan Bao was surprised. Zhong Muling nodded. It's really not easy for a core formation cultivator to refine this kind of magic weapon. I actually remember that brat who was trapped in the illusory sky formation a few days ago. Right. That person was also wearing Shenqing School's uniform, so he must have been Qin Shoujing. He's only 140 years old, but he's already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Back then, although I also formed my gold core within 100 years, my talent was much higher than his. Zhong Muling said, "He's different from you. That brat has a yang spiritual bead inside his body, and he's completely unaffected by this illusory sky formation. It's clear that his willpower is strong. If his cultivation speed isn't fast, there would be no justice in this world." Yang spiritual bead. Zhong Muling suddenly changed the topic and looked at Yuan Bao. Both of them had thoughtful expressions on their faces. Mo Tiange still couldn't understand what they were talking about. She only heard from their conversation that they seemed to have met martial uncle Shoujing, so she asked cautiously, "Great ancestor Senior Yuan Bao, have you met martial uncle Shoujing? Is he all right?" Zhong Muling turned around and nodded at her. "That youngster should be the martial uncle Shoujing you mentioned. About half a month ago he accidentally broke into the illusory sky formation and was injured. However, he finished healing his injuries a few days ago and left." At this point he suddenly said with some anger, he actually thought the illusory sky formation was a place to heal his injuries. Yuan Bao smiled. "That's because he's brave and thought we didn't have any bad intentions." Martial uncle Shoujing was indeed all right. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Then, was there a youngster beside him who looked a bit like him? Around 20 years old, early stage foundation building realm?" "I didn't see him." Zhong Muling didn't even think about it. He immediately shook his head and denied it. "That'll do. Go write your art of Sinu first and let me watch. Leave this spirit-concealing pendant with me first. I'll see if I can refine it again." Chapter 113. Mo Tiange finished cultivating in her great circulatory cycle and opened her eyes. Cultivating here, she found that her cultivation progress was unbelievably fast. She had 5 spiritual roots, so it wasn't easy for her to retain spiritual aura in her body. However, in this place the 5 spiritual roots were circulating, so her spiritual aura absorption speed was several times faster than on Mount Taikong. Normally, the density of spiritual aura would affect the speed of spiritual aura absorption, but her spiritual roots were too poor. Her absorption speed was at most 1 or 2 times faster, never 4 or 5 times faster. Moreover, ever since she entered the foundation building realm, her cultivation level had been stagnant for the past 6 months. In the past 2 days, however, her cultivation level rose very quickly. Since she handed over the art of Sinu, Zhong Muling had been studying it in seclusion. The other master of this place, Yuan Bao, was very kind. After talking to her a lot, she finally learned the reason. As it turned out, this place was called the Virtual Sky World. It was said to be an independent space created by someone with great divine power in the distant past era. There was light and water inside, and it was self-sustaining. Others couldn't enter without permission. In other words, the master of this place was a god. In the distant past era, this virtual sky world was also a magical object. Only people with great divine power could possess it. In today's world, it was even more of a heaven-defying object. The spiritual aura here was the same as in the distant past era, so the cultivation speed here was extremely fast. Zhong Muling obtained this object by chance. Emo Tiange was quite envious of this. A portable immortal's cave with such dense spiritual aura was very safe and convenient to hide. It was truly a first-class weapon for killing and escaping. She was even more envious when she learned that after reaching the deification realm, its master could make it fly like a magic weapon. Nevertheless, she also knew this thing was extraordinary. For deification realm experts like them, this thing was also a heaven-defying treasure. Taoist Yuan Bao also said that as far as they knew, aside from them, there was only one other deification realm cultivator who had a virtual sky world, so Emo Tiange was just thinking about it. Emo Tiange was very curious about this senior Yuan Bao. He seemed to have never met an outsider for many years, so he talked with her in high spirits, allowing her to understand a lot of things. As it turned out, this great ancestor of hers, Zhong Muling, not only had the spiritual roots of the origin, but his yin and yang were also exactly half. He had the purest neutral body, and his blood was also known as the blood of origin of heaven. This heavenly origin blood could only be obtained by those with a neutral primordial epic spirit root. It was an excellent primer for alchemy. When Zhong Muling was young, he entered a cultivation group that specialized in concocting pills. His master treated him very well, so he never knew he had a special constitution. Later, when his master passed away and he was imprisoned by his martial uncle, he finally realized he wasn't immortal. Later on, when he escaped from the sect, he experienced many things and stumbled along until he reached the core formation stage. Only then did his situation improve a bit. After that, with the miraculous effects of the art of origin and the blood of heaven's origin, he entered the soul formation stage in one go and never entered the world again. When Emo Tiange heard this, she felt a bit closer to this ancestor. She herself has the constitution of pure yin, so she has always been very careful. She is inevitably depressed because of this. It turns out that this ancestor also has the same troubles. Since he can cultivate to the divinity realm in the same environment, she is very confident that with the method of the origin she can also do it. As for Taoist Yuan Bao, his experience was much simpler. He was born in a big cultivation family and was in a big cultivation group. He had a constitution of pure yang and a single spiritual root. Ever since he was a child, he was pampered by his sect and family. In addition, he himself was pure, so he cultivated until he reached the nascent soul realm. Later on, he broke through and entered the soul formation realm. Soul formation cultivators are indifferent to everything in the secular world. Moreover, when his relatives and friends passed away one by one, he felt bored, so he left his family and cultivation group. Yuan Bao spoke calmly, but Emo Tiange was very jealous. Although Zhong Muling was also a genius in the distant past era, he also experienced a lot of hardships to achieve what he had. Yuan Bao, on the other hand, was a genius since he was a child and was carefully cultivated by his family and cultivation group. His cultivation path was too smooth, so smooth that she, who was born with hardships, was jealous. She couldn't help but wonder if Zhong Muling's bad attitude toward Yuan Bao was also because of this. Yuan Bao met Zhong Muling when he reached the peak of the nascent soul realm and tried to enter the soul formation realm. In order to enter the soul formation realm, Yuan Bao had lived in his family and cultivation group since he was a child, so he didn't understand the world at all. Because of this, he left his family and cultivation group and wandered around the world. One day he was very bored and squatting in a cultivation market square. When he saw Zhong Muling walking back and forth in front of him, he got excited and followed him, wanting to tease him. Just like that, they got to know each other. Originally, the two of them were just seniors teasing juniors. Who would have thought that Zhong Muling would also enter the soul formation realm? Only then did they become good friends. Cultivation in this world wasn't easy, and there were only a few soul formation realm cultivators. Only the two of them were similar in age, so they lived in seclusion together for several thousand years. Speaking of this, Yuan Bao's eyes looked quite lonely. He seemed to be very happy to have someone to accompany him, causing Emo Tiange to sigh inwardly. They also didn't know how long a soul formation realm cultivator's lifespan was. After several thousand years, they still didn't know the end of their lifespan. Hearing Yuan Bao's words, such a simple-minded person actually felt lonely. Emo Tiange couldn't help but think, wasn't the purpose of cultivation to live forever? If he still felt lonely and sad in the end, why would he want to live forever? Yuan Bao said with a smile. Although living forever was lonely, There were many beautiful things that he had to experience while alive. Therefore, if he had to choose, he would still walk on the path of cultivation and walk on the path of immortality. Otherwise, after several decades of life, some things would end before he could understand them. That would be too short. Besides, there were always ways to relieve loneliness. If he died, he wouldn't be able to experience anything. In addition, Yuan Bao also told her about Mo Yaoqing. It turned out her feeling wasn't wrong. Between Mo Yaoqing and Zhong Muling, there was only the matter between husband and wife, but there was no love between husband and wife. In the past, Mo Yaoqing plotted against Zhong Muling in order to advance to the nascent soul realm, which was why they had the fate of dual cultivation. Because of some reasons, Zhong Muling really wanted to have children. Mo Yaoqing also helped him in other matters, so he didn't care about this matter. Later, when he reached the deification realm, he found out that after one night of being husband and wife, Mo Yaoqing actually gave birth to children. However, Mo Yaoqing had already passed away. He was happy and also a bit grateful to Mo Yaoqing, so he decided to travel the world in the virtual sky world. If he reached the celestial pole, he would visit his descendants. Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved when she thought about this. Zhong Muling wanted to have children. Although his descendants had the surname Mo, he always looked after them, so he would definitely take care of her. Just as she was thinking, a voice suddenly rang in her ears. Tiange, come to my room. It was Zhong Muling's voice. Mo Tiange stood up and straightened her clothes. Knowing that the master of this room was her ancestor, she was naturally ecstatic. However, since she started cultivating, she had experienced too many things, so her mind was very calm, so she soon calmed down. Her spiritual roots of the origin were inherited from this great ancestor. For the sake of this rare spiritual root, this great ancestor was very kind to her and previously revealed his intention to give her a cultivation technique. She didn't want more than that. As long as she could get a suitable cultivation technique, she would be satisfied. Greetings, great ancestor. Zhong Muling sat cross-legged on the praying mat and pointed at the opposite side of him. When she sat down, he said amiably, "Do you know what's so special about spiritual roots of the origin?" Mo Tiange answered, "Junior only knows that spiritual roots of the origin are one of several special spiritual roots, but I don't know its real use." Zhong Muling smiled. He wasn't surprised by this answer. Very few people knew about the special characteristics of spiritual roots of the origin. The so-called origin is the origin of primordial chaos. At the beginning of the world was chaotic. The 5 elements were born and yin and yang began to grow. Thus, a world where the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, and yin and yang cycled back and forth, growing and multiplying endlessly. Spiritual roots of the origin refer to spiritual roots of the 5 elements that have the same strength and can achieve a balance inside the body. Do you understand now that I put it this way? Mo Tiange was a bit shocked. The so-called primordial chaos was the origin of the world. Spiritual roots of the origin could actually be explained in this way. She calmed herself down and pondered for a moment, then said slowly, "Great ancestor, do you mean that spiritual roots of the origin are used to cultivate a world of primordial chaos?" Zhong Muling nodded. "Correct. This is a cultivation technique from the distant past era. Later on it was gradually lost. I dare say that aside from me, no one else knows this cultivation method." I see. She never thought that spiritual roots of the origin would actually be related to the distant past era. In other words, her spiritual roots were actually excellent. I also obtained this cultivation technique by accident. Otherwise, I'd also have 5 spiritual roots. Since I don't have your pure yin constitution, I'd only have a waste spiritual root. Your pure yin constitution is actually not suitable for cultivating spiritual roots of the origin. You must know that the elements of primordial chaos include the 5 elements and yin and yang. In the past, I happened to have a balanced body of yin and yang, so my cultivation speed was very fast. You, on the other hand, have a solitary yin that doesn't grow and a solitary yang that doesn't grow. Hearing Zhong Muling's words, Mo Tiange's heart suddenly became cold. She just had hope for her innate talent, but she was actually happy for nothing? Upon seeing her expression, Zhong Muling once again smiled and said, "Pure yin constitution and spiritual roots of the origin. It's originally very hard to obtain even one of them. Now that you've obtained both, you'll have to give a discount. However, you don't need to be depressed. Pure yin constitution has other benefits. It's not like you can't cultivate the art of the origin." Yin and Yang both have 5 elements, so you can cultivate the 5 elements of Yin first. In the past 2 days I've carefully studied your art of Sinu and modified it a bit. I added the cultivation method of the art of the origin. From now on, let's call it the Sunu art of the origin. Zhong Muling pointed at the 2 jade slips on the table. This is my original art of the origin Taiyuan record. This is the Sunu art of the origin I modified. I gave this Taiyuan record to you because I don't have a pure Yin constitution. This Sunu art of the origin was derived from my deduction. If this cultivation technique isn't to your liking, you can just recultivate this Taiyuan record. Hearing this, Emo Tiange was somewhat overwhelmed by the favor. She originally thought Zhong Muling being willing to modify her cultivation technique was already very good. She didn't expect he would directly give her the art of the origin and even say such things. Great ancestor, Zhong Muling pondered for a moment, then said, although you're my descendant, I can't keep you in this virtual sky world. This virtual sky world is a space from the distant past era. Cultivating here will naturally be very fast, but without worldly experience your mental state will certainly be lacking. At that time making a realm breakthrough will become a problem. Now that you're an elite disciple of a famous cultivation group and have a promising future, I won't keep you here. You can stay here for a while and practice this Sunu art of the origin to see if it's feasible. When the time comes I'll give you several treasures as a token of our blood ties. Yes, Emo Tiange answered. She didn't have any delusions about staying here. After all, several thousand years had passed, and the blood ties between her and this great ancestor were very faint. It was already very good that he was willing to take care of her. Seeing how obedient she was, Zhong Muling seemed to feel a bit sorry for her. He said, during this time if you have any problems you can ask me. Although I won't do everything for you, I won't let you be bullied by others. Chapter 114. Time is constant, space is balance. Heaven and earth are divided into Yin and Yang, containing the 5 elements. Metal gives birth to water, water gives birth to wood, wood gives birth to fire, fire gives birth to metal. Metal subdues wood, wood subdues earth, earth subdues water, water subdues fire, and fire subdues metal. Metal is Yin, so it's sharp. Metal is Yang, so it gathers thunder, so it's lead. Wood is Yin, so it's spirit. Wood is Yang, so it drives away evil, so it's break. Water is Yin, so it's crystallized. Water is Yang, so it's illusionary. Fire is Yin, so it gathers souls, so it's dark. Fire is Yang, so it's immortal, so it's nirvana. Earth is Yin, so it's immortal. Earth is Yang, so it's firm, so it's unbreakable. Opening Taiyuan record, she saw these words at the beginning. The origin was the origin of the primordial chaos. From the beginning of the world's creation, heaven and earth were chaotic. Until the beginning of the primordial world, the sun and moon were hidden, the 4 seasons changed, the world was balanced, and time became constant. This Taiyuan record revolved around the 2 words constant. When she opened the Sunu art of the origin again, the words at the beginning had been replaced. She couldn't help but sigh as she read them one by one. 4 foundation building cultivators like her, deification cultivators, were really like celestial beings. Zhong Muling didn't have a pure Yin body. Just by examining the way the spiritual aura in her body worked, this Sunu art of the origin seemed to be created by her. Bit by bit, everything matched perfectly. At first glance, she felt like she was in a trance. After she finished memorizing the contents, she tried to cultivate in this small hut. Sitting cross-legged, she first moved her spiritual aura in a great circle before guiding it to slowly move along her meridians. Her spiritual aura had completely turned into Yin's spiritual aura. Right now, it flowed along her meridians, moving around according to the key points of the Sunu art of the origin. After the spiritual aura circled around her and returned to her dantian, it seemed to have triggered something. She suddenly felt her meridians contract, and she felt pain all over her body as countless spiritual aura suddenly poured into her. The spiritual aura in this virtual sky world was dense. In an instant, countless spiritual aura seemed to pour into her dantian. She knew this was normal, so she didn't panic. She slowly guided the spiritual aura into her meridians, little by little, into her own spiritual aura. Outside the house, under a tree, Zhong Muling and Yuan Bao were sitting across from each other. They were playing chess while chatting with each other. Yuan Bao watched as Zhong Muling glanced at the hut on the side from time to time. He joked, "Do you have to be like this? If there's a problem, we're all here. Do you think we can't save him? Zhong Muling curled his lips. What problem could there be? I used the divination technique to derive this cultivation method, so it won't be a problem for her to cultivate to the nascent soul stage. Then what are you looking at? Ingot put down a chess piece and said indifferently, this girl seems to have a good comprehension ability. In my opinion, we should just let her fend for herself. If she can't even comprehend the cultivation method, then there's no need to count on her. Zhong Muling glared at Mo Tiange and said, she's just a foundation-building cultivator. Do you expect her to have our comprehension? I didn't say that, Yuan Bao said shamelessly. I won't talk about myself, but before you reach the core formation realm, you didn't have any help. Now she's an elite disciple of a big cultivation group and has a master and elders. If she can't do that, then what's the point of training her? If you want to achieve something, you can't rely on your elders. You can't lack either of your aptitude or temperament. Otherwise, you'll also fall at the bottleneck of advancing to the next realm. Alas, I suffered a lot in the past. By the time he finished speaking, he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Relying on his good aptitude, he easily cultivated to the nascent soul realm, but he couldn't pass the deification realm. Although Mo Tiange's aptitude wasn't bad, her pure Yin constitution weakened her spiritual roots of the origin, so she was naturally inferior to Zhong Muling and him. Presumably, there would be many tests waiting for her in the future. Zhong Muling also fell silent upon hearing what Mo Tiange said. The two of them played chess in silence for a while. Yuan Bao said, we've been in the celestial pole for some time. How about we go back to Yunzhong and take a look? Oh. Zhong Muling muttered to himself for a while, then said, that's fine. If there's no problem with this girl's cultivation technique, we'll go back to Yunzhong and play with that old fellow Han Quan while we're at it. Upon hearing this name, Yuan Bao chuckled and said, good idea. That phoenix-feathered bird of his is about to shed its feathers. Let's go and fish for some benefits. You're the one who wants to fish for some benefits, right? That bird's feathers are useless to me. Don't be so direct. In any case, what's yours is mine and what's mine is also yours. We've known each other for so long. Do we still need to divide it between us? Zhong Muling glared at him. Which one of the things you live and use isn't mine? What kind of nice words are you saying? Oh, since you're unhappy, I won't say nice words. I'll just use it in the future. Zhong Muling made a grabbing motion with his hand. A square seal appeared in his hand. In an instant, it swelled to the size of a small mountain and smashed towards Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao's figure flashed and instantly appeared more than 300 meters away. With a loud rumble, the flower field nearby was smashed into pieces, but Yuan Bao wasn't harmed in the slightest. I say. Yuan Bao was about to speak when Zhong Muling waved his hand. The square seal was immediately pulled back by him and he once again smashed it towards Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao was greatly alarmed. He reached around his waist and a small square shield appeared in his hand. The shield expanded against the wind and managed to block the square seal. I say. While competing with Zhong Muling with spiritual power, Yuan Bao spoke with difficulty. Aren't you afraid that the spiritual aura fluctuation is too big and that the little girl's cultivation will go awry and she'll be possessed by the devil? Zhong Muling was startled. He immediately put away the square seal and moved, disappearing from where he stood. Phew. Yuan Bao heaved a sigh of relief. He muttered to himself, this brat, his cultivation level is rising really fast. If I want to win against him now, I'll have to expend a lot of energy. Alas, sooner or later I'll be surpassed by him. His tone was relaxed, completely devoid of the hardships he faced when he fought against Zhong Muling. The implication was that his cultivation level was much higher than Zhong Muling's. At this moment, inside the small room, Zhong Muling was frowning as if he had a headache. On the praying mat, Mo Tiange's body was crooked. She was already unconscious. How could a small foundation-building cultivator like her withstand the spiritual aura pressure from two deification cultivators? If it wasn't for her pure Yin constitution, her cultivation level would have been crippled already. Even her current situation wouldn't be much better. Although her cultivation level was still there, her spiritual aura was completely out of control under their spiritual aura pressure. Now her meridians were completely destroyed and her dantian was also riddled with holes. This is troublesome. Zhong Muling pondered for a moment then said to himself, consider yourself lucky. Now I have to help you reconstruct your dantian and mend your meridians. I might as well use the 5 spirit fruit to help you change your tendons and cleanse your marrows. Mo Tiange naturally didn't know what the 5 spirit fruit was. It was a spiritual seed that grew at the beginning of the world. One tree was divided into 5 elements, and the 5 fruits formed a whole, so it was called the 5 spirit fruit. It took 10,000 years to germinate, 10,000 years to grow branches, 10,000 years to become a tree, 10,000 years to bloom, 10,000 years to bear fruit, and 50,000 years to grow a 5 spirit fruit. This fruit was hard to find even in the distant past era. Unfortunately, this virtual sky world simulated the spiritual aura environment of the distant past era. When he obtained this fruit, there were 2 5 spirit fruits growing inside it. Now one of them was already ripe. When Zhong Muling thought of this, his heart ached again. He hadn't even warmed up the 5 spirit fruit, but it was going to be used by someone first. It was all that birdman's fault. Unfortunately, that birdman's noisy voice once again entered his ears. Aling, someone entered the illusory sky formation again. Wei Jiaxi opened her eyes in a daze. The previous scene was still fresh in her mind. The 5 demonic beasts kept attacking her. Her water spirit flag was destroyed, and only a few of her other magic tools were left. She thought she was going to die for sure, but she didn't. There was nothing in front of her except the trees that kept moving backward. Moving backward? Startled, she raised her head and was instantly stunned. After a long time she finally found her voice. Marshal. Marshal uncle. Qin, she nodded. Seeing that she was awake, he stopped and let go of her. For a moment Wei Jiaxi didn't know what to feel. There was only one thought in her mind. Marshal uncle came to save me. Senior marshal sister? Second senior marshal sister. Wei Jiaxi immediately straightened her expression. She turned her head and saw Luo Fengxue rushing over. Seeing that Luo Fengxue was safe and sound, Wei Jiaxi smiled through her tears. It's great that you're all right. Second senior marshal sister, I was scared to death. Fortunately, marshal uncle Shoujing was nearby. Before Wei Jiaxi could speak, Qin Shi faintly said, all right Fengxue. I'll take you back first. Luo Fengxue was stunned. She then said anxiously, but marshal uncle Tiange's gone. Qin Shi frowned. Luo Fengxue explained, we were originally with Tiange, but when I was talking to senior marshal sister just now, Tiange went to keep a lookout nearby. In the end, demonic beasts came. Senior marshal sister told me to find Tiange and go back first, so I couldn't find her. Qin Shi recalled that when he felt the spiritual aura fluctuation, Luo Fengxue indeed shouted Tiange. He pondered for a moment then waved his sleeve. A flying cloud appeared under their feet. You can't be so reckless in the future. I'll take you back first. What about Tiange? Luo Fengxue asked anxiously. This was a dense forest. If Tiange was left here alone, I'm afraid, Qin Shi said, I have my own plans for this matter. You don't need to worry about it. Okay. Luo Fengxue was startled but still answered. Marshal uncle has always been taking care of Tiange, so he probably won't ignore me, right? The flying cloud rose and rapidly flew towards Luoyan Cliff. A core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon was extremely fast. In just a moment they arrived at Luoyan Cliff. After putting Wei Jiaxi and Luo Fengxue down, Qin Shi said, you two can go back first. Fengxue, report to your master that I'm safe and sound. If I find Tiange, I'll come back. Marshal uncle, are you going to look for Tiange? Luo Fengxue hurriedly stepped forward. Qin Shi showed a faint smile. Don't worry. I'm fine now. You just need to tell your master. But, Luo Fengxue still wanted to say something, but Qin Shi had already used the flying cloud, turned around and left. She could only sigh. She was naturally worried about Tiange, but it wouldn't be good for marshal uncle to leave just because of Tiange, right? Second senior marshal sister? Upon seeing Wei Jiaxi's silent expression, Luo Fengxue cautiously called out to her. Wei Jiaxi glanced at her then shook her head. I'm fine. Luo Fengxue naturally didn't believe Wei Jiaxi when she said she was fine. She said sternly, second senior marshal sister, no matter what, you mustn't go the wrong way again. Wei Jiaxi smiled faintly. I know what you want to say. Don't worry. She then turned around and walked towards the big tent without saying anything else. Luo Fengxue thought for a moment then followed her. Second senior martial sister, wait for me. Chapter 115. Qinshi cautiously looked around. He only saw a vast ocean with surging clouds and surging winds. He stood on the ocean like duckweed in the wind. The surging spiritual aura scraped against his body, making him ache fiercely. He knew this was an extremely brilliant formation. The master of this place must be a nascent soul cultivator, so even his peak-fixing lamp couldn't detect any abnormalities. He also knew the master of this place didn't have any evil intentions. A few days ago he fought against a 7th-rank demonic beast and spent a lot of effort to kill it. In the end he was injured and happened to enter this formation. During the days he was trapped in the formation, the master of this place didn't do anything to him. This formation was also a trapping formation, not a killing formation, so he simply steeled his heart and healed his injuries on the spot. When he healed, the master opened the formation and let him go. Maybe the master was tired of him, or maybe the master found him pleasing to the eye. However, he didn't have any evil intentions when he entered the formation unintentionally. Now that he wanted to break through the formation, this trapping formation might turn into a killing formation. Before he could figure out what to do, a flash of lightning flashed. Qinshi's figure moved and he instantly dashed thousands of feet away. When he looked back, he was instantly covered in cold sweat. The place where he originally stood had set off monstrous waves that collided with the lightning, creating an earth-shattering rumble. A part of his sleeve had already been burnt. Sure enough, it turned into a killing formation. When he entered this formation a few days ago, every day was an illusory formation and a bewildering formation, which couldn't cause him any real harm. But now if he was a little slower he might end up like this sleeve. After thinking for a while, Qinshi closed his eyes and fully released his divine sense. There was an endless ocean. He sighed in disappointment and his eyes looked gloomy. Sure enough, this formation wasn't something he could break with his current ability. Who was the master of this place? It wasn't like he hadn't seen a nascent soul cultivator's formation before, and he even used the peak-fixing lamp to break a nascent soul cultivator's restriction. Facing a nascent soul expert, even if he didn't have the ability to fight back, he could at least do something. He never felt like he was being trampled on, like he didn't even have a chance to escape. He sighed softly, but a moment later he closed his eyes and condensed his spiritual aura. He summoned the 3-yang real fire sword from his dantian. Under the spell, the sword shone with dazzling golden light and raged like fire. This 3-yang real fire sword was his natal magic weapon. In one of his adventures in the past, he accidentally obtained a cultivation technique and the method to refine this sword. The two of them were originally a set. When he saw that the two of them combined, their power was astonishing. Moreover, they were compatible with his own spiritual roots, so he chose to make it his natal magic weapon. After forming his gold core, he went through many difficulties and used the golden essence true fire to refine it. As soon as this sword was born, the wind, clouds, and thunder rumbled. That year was also the time of the demonic beast riot. Relying on this sword, Mo Tiange, who had just formed his gold core, became famous in West Kunwu. He speculated that if he had enough spiritual energy, he might even be able to fight against a nascent soul cultivator. Now that he was inside this formation, he could feel the powerful strength of the master of this place. His cultivation level was only in the core formation realm, so he could only try his luck with the 3-yang real fire sword. Lightning flashed again, but Qinshi didn't move. The 3-yang real fire sword floated in the air. With the support of his spiritual aura, it shone brightly. A bolt of lightning finally jumped down. He raised his hand and the 3-yang real fire sword floated in the air and collided with the lightning. The sword shook, but it managed to withstand the impact. Upon seeing this scene, Qinshi once again made a hand seal. The 3-yang real fire sword absorbed the lightning and stood still. On the contrary, the lightning gradually weakened. One bright, one dim. The fire became fiercer and the lightning gradually died out. By the time the lightning disappeared, the 3-yang real fire sword was burning like a scorching sun. It was so bright that it couldn't be looked at directly. Qinshi made another hand seal and a threatening momentum soared into the sky, almost tearing a hole in the sky. After an unknown amount of time, Qinshi's face gradually turned pale. His spiritual aura was almost exhausted, but he couldn't stop. Metal gave birth to lightning and fire restrained lightning. His 3 Yang real fire sword happened to have a metal body and a fire appearance, so he first used fire to resist it, then seized its power and used metal to support its momentum. This power didn't belong to him, so he could barely control it. If he stopped now, he would suffer a backlash. Such a powerful heavenly thunder, and he hadn't mastered his body refining technique yet. If he fought it head-on, he would definitely die without a corpse. Aha, this brat isn't bad. He has my style in the past. At that moment, Ingot was talking to himself inside the virtual sky world. Not bad, not bad. A mere core formation cultivator actually dared to fight against the illusory sky formation by using the mutual restraint of the 5 elements. And since you're pleasing to the eye, I'll play with you. Right after he finished speaking, Ingot flicked his sleeve, and a crack immediately appeared in front of him. He then jumped into it. Right at this moment, Zhong Muling used both of his hands to support Emo Tiange, helping her to sit up so that she was sitting cross-legged. One of his hands formed a palm and slapped the top of her head while the other took out a jade box from inside his robe. Zhong Muling's palm emitted an incomparably pure spiritual aura. This spiritual aura was neither yin nor yang. It contained all 5 elements, but it didn't look like impure spiritual aura at all. It seemed to have formed a new kind of spiritual aura, clean, pure, and extremely gentle. This spiritual aura easily entered Emo Tiange's meridians and dantian, slowly merging with it. Emo Tiange's pale face gradually recovered. Under the nourishment of his spiritual aura, her vitality seemed to be rapidly restored, and her complexion became ruddy bit by bit. Seeing that she was gradually recovering, Zhong Muling flicked his other hand and opened the jade box, revealing a green branch inside. On the branch there was a human-shaped fruit that was neither grass nor gold. It was said that after 1,000 years, ginseng could transform into a human form and become a ginseng baby. In fact, only immortal herbs could transform into human forms. In the cultivation world, ginseng was just an ordinary herb with immortal aura. There were countless spiritual herbs with more spiritual aura than ginseng. However, ginseng was the closest species to immortal herbs, so it could grow into a human form. This 5-spirit fruit was an immortal fruit. In the human world today, this kind of immortal root could no longer be found. Only virtual sky worlds, which simulated the primal chaos, could have some of them. However, there weren't many known virtual sky worlds, and he was the only one that had 5 spirit fruits. Zhong Muling picked up the 5-spirit fruit. When he thought about how he had only picked this fruit for a few days, an angry expression appeared on his face. But soon he calmed down. He was already a deification cultivator, so his state of mind had long been calm. Even though this matter made him angry, it only lasted for a moment. He used his spiritual aura to lift the 5-spirit fruit. Under the pure spiritual aura, the fruit slowly melted and turned into a transparent essence. He slowly lifted the essence and poured it into Emo Tiange's mouth. The essence of the 5-spirit fruit entered her body and slid down along her meridians. Wherever it went, her meridians were restored and slid down to her dantian. The damaged parts were repaired little by little. In the end, it completely immersed and merged with her dantian. After an unknown amount of time, Zhong Muling let go of her and said softly, "The 5-spirit body cultivator is impervious to devil aura. With your pure yin body and the 5-spirit fruit's reconstruction of your meridians, you won't suffer from cultivation deviation in the future aside from inner demons during realm breakthroughs. I've treated you fairly." After an unknown amount of time, Emo Tiange woke up from her coma. He had a strange dream. In the dream, she seemed to have returned to the beginning of the primal chaos, when heaven and earth were first created. She was surrounded by dense spiritual aura. She greedily absorbed the spiritual aura and swallowed spiritual plants one by one. Her dantian and meridians rapidly evolved and grew, and her cultivation level increased unbelievably fast. When she regained her senses, she saw a pool of blood in front of her. Oh right. She was cultivating when she suddenly felt a strong spiritual aura pressure. This spiritual aura pressure almost made her lose her ability to move in an instant. She lost control of her spiritual aura and it rushed everywhere in her meridians. She was terrified and wanted to stop cultivating, but the spiritual aura pressure pressed down on her again. Her whole body was in pain and she lost consciousness. Emo Tiange knew this was cultivation deviation. She couldn't help but feel strange. Martial Uncle Shenin said she had a pure Yin constitution. If Yin and Yang didn't clash, it would be very difficult for her to suffer from cultivation deviation. What was this spiritual aura pressure that made her lose control of her spiritual aura without any ability to resist? However, she immediately thought of a more important matter. If she suffered from cultivation deviation, what about her cultivation level? She hastily sat cross-legged, but when she tried to operate her spiritual aura, she was stunned. Not only was her cultivation level fine, but it even entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. After being stunned for a moment, Mo Tiange was ecstatic. It had been less than a year since she entered the foundation building realm. Before this, her cultivation level had stagnated. Let alone advancing, even the growth of her spiritual aura was so slow that she almost couldn't feel it. But now she actually entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. How could she not be ecstatic? Entering the middle stage of the foundation building realm in half a year was simply inconceivable. Even someone like Yi Jingwen, who reached the middle stage of the foundation building realm at the age of 40, could be considered a genius. "You're awake?" A voice came into her ears. It was Zhong Muling talking to her using his divine sense. Mo Tiange had just entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm, so she knew it must be this great ancestor's doing. She felt even more grateful and answered respectfully, "Yes, great ancestor. And how's your situation?" Junior has entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Although Mo Tiange had a calm temperament, she was still very happy. Zhong Muling snorted softly, then said, "That's not what I'm asking. Feel your meridians and dantian." Mo Tiange was startled. She immediately closed her eyes and operated her spiritual aura. Meridians. She didn't notice it before, but now she realized that her meridians seemed to have become elastic. No matter how much spiritual aura she operated, she didn't feel any pain. No matter how much she operated her spiritual aura, her meridians could completely accommodate it. As for her dantian, it seemed, no matter how much spiritual aura there was, it could accommodate it. 5 spirit fruit. Zhong Muling was still a bit indignant, but he calmly said to her, "I wasn't paying attention for a moment and forgot you were cultivating and couldn't be disturbed, so I caused you to have a cultivation deviation. I've already used the 5 spirit fruit to help you reconstruct your meridians, change your tendons and cleanse your marrows. In the future you'll never have a cultivation deviation again. Of course, that doesn't include the inner demon during your realm breakthrough." Never have a cultivation deviation? Mo Tiange regained her train of thought. She was even more ecstatic than before. This was much more difficult than the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Never have a cultivation deviation. Didn't that mean she didn't need to worry about cultivating the soul refining art? Junior doesn't know how to repay great ancestors' kindness. Zhong Muling said faintly, "I'm already a deification expert. In this human world I'm almost like a god. Why would I expect you to repay me? Since you're my descendant, I'm naturally willing to take care of you." Yes, Junior has said too much. Junior will certainly cultivate diligently in the future and won't let great ancestor down. And there's another matter. When you had a cultivation deviation, that boy surnamed Qin broke into the illusory sky formation. He said he was looking for you. I saw he was quite courageous, so I let him stay. Do you want to meet him? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.